lost his arm in his
Or
past.
request on me
He,
in like a minute or so.
grafted a wooden
Okay, excellent. I will click on it.
Nice.
That's pretty neato.
arm. I love it.
Hello.
Look at his tail.
What's the max population in here?
40.
Okay.
And that may be with some lag for our less CPU enabled.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's why
Timmy friends?
Yes.
That's
I'm
why
only
I'm Sadie right now.
friends. Anyways, I'm gonna click on the link. Y'all see you on the other side.
Wait, what?
Oh, there's
Hello.
That is
Making
unless
another
go to
instance.
two clients for me. In which case, I will be at 2 places at once, and I will become the ultimate.
Wait, are you able to do that if you're already in? Oh wait, we're for a game. We can just request off of you again, right?
What else we got? That's a good song.
I think that's what she said.
Oh my god, I have 2
Wow.
VR chat clients open at the same time.
Ah, yeah.
Oh, that's
Ah!
magic. Oh, there they
Wait,
go.
wait, who is this again?
Help me! Help me!
Oh wait, this was your maybe librarian,
Help
isn't it?
me!
I
Oh,
noticed.
God.
Look at your
Well,
arms.
Help
They're so stiff.
Help me!
They're so stiff.
That's lewd.
Stiffies!
I saw what you did. I saw what you did.
I hear savage.
I saw that, Deb. I saw that, Deb. I saw that, Deb.
Boim. And a boim.
What?
Oh, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Wubba.
Ah!
Do you
What?
do you need us?
You're so
Hello?
skinny. Look at you. Oh, fuck it.
Oh, there they go.
What mic are you using? Are you using your headset?
Fuck you!
Oh,
You s-
Women.
Women!
Women. I said she wants you, women. I said she wants you.
Get on the fucking chocobo.
oh, whoa, hello.
Alright, anyways. Nerds
Women.
request on me.
Women. Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Request on you. What?
Oh,
He says he loves you more. No.
Are we requesting off her? All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
You're fat.
She's going to another one.
She made an invite link and posted it in the
because
announcement.
I got the invite.
I was planning to see if I had time to post
Do we
something.
just wait a few seconds?
Wasted in time.
Just wait a few seconds.
Don't even worry about that. I had a massive panic attack today, so I'm a bit tired.
It should load.
Also, House of
it's
I love
the
this
same-
model. It's so
same
cool.
page you're in
Okay.
right now.
I feel super
Okay.
better now that I've had a nap.
I love the
I
little
ate myself
feetsies.
into a
Let's eat it.
coma and took my anti-anxiety.
Oh, the little bitches.
That's good. What's this?
Let go.
Oh.
Onward.
Do you know how many mozzarella sticks
Cue it
I
at
ate?
me.
Oh wow, the angle of this is kind of interesting. It's like I'm staring up in the air. I'm like,
Bullet seed.
alright, I'm going. I was nervous there for a second. I thought I had the world bug.
She's a model that wouldn't show
I was
up
like,
in desktop mode, okay? I'm embarrassed.
Hey, I had to deal with that for almost 3 weeks straight. Like, my headset was broken.
I
That
need
was
to
fun.
actually get an official desktop avatar again.
I was like,
A long time ago, I had a Roomba avatar that I used whenever I was in desktop.
But I am already
on the
here.
RP and desktop. That was interesting for the first time.
Okay. Okay. Hey, May.
You are best girl, hands down.
Why are you so fucking cool?
Not loaded.
Like, what the what
Where they spawn.
I was like, can't see.
I thought I was being funny because I was like, Oblivious doesn't realize I'm in the
Oh,
lobby.
hello.
I'm like, oh,
I'm sitting on the ground.
just made
Okay,
another
there.
lobby.
I accepted it the second time.
Oh.
I
You
played
got like
myself.
a little joint right there in the middle.
Hmm. I'm still making his lore. But his
Jagger.
arm
Ah!
was torn
You gotta
off,
go make
or
a
Hello.
you know,
full series, because that's all like the
something
kinda
happened to it.
the
Ah,
main
So he
my way.
grafted a wooden arm to him.
Uh, you should
How
just
was you?
say-
You're still a blue
Are we
man
always
to me.
missing our
Unfortunately.
limbs, huh?
Yeah,
Everything's still loading.
I got a robot arm.
See, but you still have a limb.
Let's just fix that, alright?
Well, load faster.
Are those chains connecting it?
Load faster.
No, they're
I have
just
to load
chains.
everyone in
They're for
here
spells
all
and
at the same
stuff.
time.
Gotcha.
Now you're loaded.
Why is your arm there, Kata?
Eh.
Hmm?
Why? Why? Why is it still there? Ah! Ah!
This is a casual avatar though.
Here, give it to me, I'll eat it off.
I was like, something is.
Give it to me, I'll eat it off. Come here, Kata.
Oh,
I'll eat it off. Put it in my mouth. I'll
She's
eat
so
it.
pretty. Sorry,
I'll
I'm
make
really
it go
hungry.
away. Ah! Thank you.
Is she gonna be in roleplay?
I can barely.
I think she'll only be in roleplay for Mara and Ez because I mentioned that she'd be like if
Normally, yes.
if anybody needed like a librarian NPC, I could provide with this model. But other than that, no, I'm not bringing her into the larger roleplay. And
The
Mara
lore
said that she would.
of the Feywild.
A lot of people asking about the
Mara
Feywild.
said that she'd like to have a librarian for her and Lucian's castle, so I'll be doing her there, likely.
Oh, there we go.
Cause busting makes me feel good.
She is a old girl.
Yeah, she is.
Hell yeah.
And then I have
So cute.
I have a
Got 'em.
shorty as well that I made recently.
Hell yeah.
Why you gotta be so damn cute? Bah.
What is that?
Make it stop.
Little devil.
I'm actually really happy, Oblivious.
Hardtail,
I
I
want
love
to
it.
fix her textures a little bit. I don't
So
That's
I turned on
from,
the thing to get rid of lag.
I know where
and
that's. I know where that's from,
it's-
or at least
where did she
that's
go?
how it looks
Oh,
like.
no.
Oblivious, I'm gonna.
Oh, you
I'm
made a
gonna,
mini?
I'm gonna.
Oh, there's a mini of it? Wow.
I also don't have any.
You're gonna what? Hello?
I stuttered. I'm sorry. Pet you.
Grandma, is that you?
Hello,
Grandma.
Wait, your little thingy. Your little thingies move.
Yes.
The Mark's move.
Oh, that's adorable.
Okay, so I know that
What
the
is
calling
this?
now
I
works
love it.
there. It is from
I pack.
Kier's Avatar world that
I want
Yay.
to see.
It reminds me of that lady
Oh,
from
hello.
it makes me feel good.
that indie game with the child in the yellow raincoat.
Oh, I.
Oh yeah.
I want to check that out.
What's
It
the
reminds me
name
of
of
that
that?
lady at the end. I can't remember, but you know what I'm talking about because that mask and everything, and
I think so. Yeah.
like the lady and all that.
Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah,
It reminds me of that.
blah, blah, blah.
Dagger.
What the?
Touch your butt.
The
Oh wait,
thing
your
with
butt
the
doesn't
blood
jiggle
moon?
on this one.
I was about to say. Are we
No,
doing
it
this
doesn't.
again?
Dream
Move
of
your
the
hair.
blood moon.
I want to see if your dynamic bones are actually
What?
active, because I have the thing turned. I have the thing deactivated.
We're gonna give it a little bit more time, and then I'm gonna get started.
Nice.
I mean, I never had more than like 8 on my
Move your
character,
head.
so all of them would move.
I don't think
Actually,
so.
that's a good
I
thing.
don't think I
We
ever
should
had
probably
dynamic bones in my
point
hair
it
though.
out. It's like,
No.
hey, by the way, if you're having performance problems, be sure to fucking turn on the dynamic bone limiter and fucking other things to save your frames.
Let's just. I'll just fucking just make like a really optimized, like low poly, one material public avatar people can clone. Just be like, hey, everyone switch to this.
How can I check what this is?
Let me see. Actually, I will actually look at your avatar stats. Your avatar
Sure.
performance is poor. It's not very poor. It's just poor. So it's not
Oh, okay.
horrible. It's
Okay.
it's poor as average.
Okay.
Poor is average. What's average then?
Yeah. Poor. Yeah. Poor. I mean, the majority of avatars are poor. Mine is very poor because I have like over 150 dynamic bones.
Yeah.
And like, my Brim
I
avatar
wonder
is
what-
not
I'll
the
have
most
to-
optimized.
See, you have 48
I'll have to check in
transforms,
who later.
so 16 of them will be turned off for us.
Okay.
You have 11 materials.
I'll have to
Well,
check
no,
in who
Dagger,
later.
that's not how that works. If the total
Has it-
number exceeds 32, all of her dynamic bones are disabled.
Oh, because I've seen people with over it. Some will work, but a
No,
lot of their main
that's-
parts will be stiffened.
No, that's not how that works. It does not do that.
Well, then how did they?
I don't know. Either they had their dynamic bones set up weird, or your game is bugged, because that's not how it's
Oh,
supposed to work.
jeez. You
I
spooked
literally
me,
read.
Oblivious.
I literally read the documentation on the change.
Oh.
What?
Yay.
You're all gay.
Yeah.
Are you the big gay, Oblivious?
She's a big gay, yes.
The biggest.
The biggest of gays.
Yes, because
Where
I'm the
is-
only gay that is also big wholesome.
Excuse
You're
me?
wholesome.
Being wholesome.
You're
being
wholesome.
is not gay.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
it is.
I'm sorry. I can't.
Yeah,
I
it
can't
is.
ex-
Nobody
I
wants to
can't-
do it.
Oh,
Everybody
hello.
is like, show me your fucking butthole, and I'm just like, what the fuck? What the
Oddly
fuck? Why do you want
specific.
to see that? What the fuck?
Sorry, but I can't really think of you as wholesome anymore ever since that one night.
Wait,
What?
one night? There were
Which
several
night?
one nights.
Then oh well, yeah, there is several nights where she's just like, everyone thinks I'm wholesome, but in actuality, and then goes on a rant of how unwholesome she is.
She went on a rant
Yes,
of how
but
much
by
she
comparison
loves
to everyone
titties.
else, I am pure.
Uh-huh.
Nah.
That's like
Who am I
Sachi
kidding?
saying he's
Who
pure.
am I kidding?
Well, I think I'll just mute that for a good sec.
Go to performance options in the top right.
Wait.
Hamsters.
We hamsters.
Hamsters.
Woo!
Laza, I swear to God.
Am I like crouching? Okay. Woo!
Teach you this lesson, old
I'm
man.
ugly, please. Don't
You're
look
just
at me.
stiff. You're not ugly. You're just balding.
Is this everybody?
Oh.
Anyone? Don't look at my
They're
stomach.
coming.
Yes.
There's about 3 or 4 more coming.
Yeah.
Alright.
They're hamsters, so.
We are hamsters.
Well,
proud to be a
some of
hamster
them
by the end.
went AFK for a minute too. So.
Fuck is
Yeah.
my drinks? There we go.
Christy, join me. In the seat.
Join me.
I want to pick you up and put you in my tail.
Sounds of evil, sounds of bad.
That's a big rip.
Wow.
Steps of rape.
Ripperoo. Oh, hi.
How you doing, Corey?
What the fuck is that sound?
How are you?
Plaza, look at my feet.
You know what? I forgot to do this last time.
What the fuck? Hello?
What?
Hello? Hello?
How?
Are you in desktop? Or no,
What are you? Wait, Connie? I did something?
What
It is working so well! Yay!
What is going on right now?
If someone's asking me what's going on, don't ask me, because I never know what's going on.
Everybody's wearing the mask when he was.
That's like asking a chicken why it's a chicken.
Oh, God.
She's gonna look at that and be like, that is so
Okay.
extra.
Oh.
That is...
Or rather, let me.
Did he get taller?
Well, hello.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Why did he get
Let's do this.
Alright.
Alright.
Get my
I'm up my drink
voices
over.
up.
Oh, nope. Almost did
Wanna
that.
knock over your drink?
She's like dick level.
How awful would that have been?
I like this
sorry,
drink.
what?
Another.
She didn't
Oh,
Alright.
God.
Alright, shut up! Get over here! Make sure you can hear me. Fucking... All these fucking people. Alright. Hell is wrong with my fucking arm? Okay, anyway. So let's get straight into it. Alright. I went a little crazy this time, and I prepared a lesson curriculum. Like a whole plan. So, we're gonna go over a lot of information. Okay? If it's too much for you, well, too fucking bad. Okay. Yeah, that's not the way to say.
Knows my expectations.
It'll be both for everybody in here,
Probably recording it.
and also, well, I'm also streaming it, and also for everybody that is watching right now. You'll be able to ask questions and stuff as we go through each little segment. So, this is an RP workshop, and the reason that I'm doing this is I've been doing this for a long time, and for many of those years professionally, so it's my hope to help people that are new to roleplay or still figuring some stuff out to get them to the point that they need to be, to where they can be successful. And also, hopefully, to teach them the more harsher lessons early, and with someone that won't take advantage of them. I've been looking in each of the Discords, people suggesting their characters. I've been reading all of them, so don't think I'm not, because I am. I'm always watching, even if I don't have time to respond. So,
Right.
I figured that I hit the next couple of things all together nice in a row. So we're going to start at the start. Before you make any character, what is it that you have to determine? Anyone?
Who they are.
Okay.
Close, but no.
Alignment?
What world are they in?
Oh.
If you don't develop with the world that they are in,
The world
then you
that
can't
they're
really
in.
make a character.
True. Because you don't know
Because something
the world that
existed
they're
before
in,
your
you'll be
character.
like,
Something has.
What's going on?
You can't have a plant without soil, right? You're gonna have to have that built for your character. Now, to be clear, I'm not gonna go over every cosmology that possibly exists, and also you have to remember that when making a character in VR chat, you're gonna have to adapt.
VR chat.
All right, especially if you want to do Okay, I'm gonna stand up. My hands are. I'm sorry. This is very distracting for me. Hold on a second. Okay, so.
Not like those.
And any way that you produce these things, you're going to have to keep an open mind, especially if you want to have, planar cross or organization cross RP and all that different stuff. Because if you don't at least have a knowledge of what your character is from to the different pieces and mechanics that you need to have, then you're not going to be able to develop anything that you make. All right, and we're going to go over all the different isms later, like when you make an anime character and how awful of an idea that can be, which we'll get to that later. But first, I'm going to talk about the cosmologies. There are 3 basic fantasy cosmologies that exist. They are gradient, branching, and circular. For those of you that have no idea what that means, I can give you some examples. First is circular. That one's easy. Most basic D&D cosmologies follow a circular pattern, such as the Great Wheel from Faerun, or the Wheel of Time, and so on and so forth. A circular cosmology is indicative that the entirety of that existence is contained within this arrangement, where there's nothing outside of it. Now, this means that roleplay inside of that circle is going to be accurate, but roleplay outside of that circle will not be accurate if it is possible at all. So, that'll lead to a lot of people feeling constrained, even if their character is accurate inside of that circle. The next one is branching, which actually is more commonly involved with our own real-life mythology, such as, for example, the Norse mythology is a branching mythology, based off of the world tree Yggdrasil. It's literally branching. I don't think it can get any more literal than that. And that's basically what that is, in which there are a hierarchy of existences. And that each of the different hierarchy of existences determine what is and what is not possible. So that way you have a sort of middle ground between circular cosmology and the most extreme one, which is gradient. Now let's talk about gradient cosmology. Gradient cosmology, unless an anime follows a specific mythology that it has based off of real life or based off of another traditional, nearly all anime cosmologies are gradient. What's an example of a gradient cosmology that everyone should be familiar with? Lovecraft. Cthulhu. Cthulhu uses a gradient measure for its cosmology. What does gradient actually mean? Gradient means where it's based off of the closeness to your center. It's based off of, in this case, humanity. Not your character, but the person that's wearing this. All right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the closeness to you. The further away it gets, the more the gradient becomes unrecognizable. Which is why those types of cosmologies can get away with being vague and nonsensical. They can get away with being inaccurate, because that's the purpose of it. Now, just because that is an easier form of roleplay does not mean that it is the better kind. In fact, it's quite often not the case at all. Because nothing is worse than having inconsistencies in your own cosmology. The reason why Lovecraft and Cthulhu and things of that nature get away with it is because that's part of the point, is the mystery. And anime gets away with it because it is merely as much as it needs to be for the realistic constraints of why an anime exists. Right? An anime, generally speaking, has 20 minutes an episode to do all of that, and most anime seasons don't last further than 12. So that's not a lot of time to tell your story. So that's why they go gradient. That's why a lot of mangas are way more involved, because it's a written platform and a medium, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. But essentially, those are the three cosmologies. So you have to choose which of those cosmologies you want your character to be from. And then you have the process of placing where they are. And now we're going to get to character roles. All right? Who here knows what a character role is? Or at least know anything about the 8 literary character roles? Okay, I'll give you some examples. Who here knows what a protagonist is? A protagonist? That's you! That's each and every single one of you. You're a protagonist in your own story. You're the hero, so to speak. Protagonist doesn't have to mean hero. Who here knows what an antagonist is? That's the other person. That's the conflicting viewpoint. The villain, if you will. Each and every story is made of these different literary parts, and there are many, many different kinds. For example, there are 8 character roles that are traditionally used in literary storytelling. The protagonist, the antagonist, the mentor, the tempter, the sidekick, the skeptic, the emotional, and the logical. All right? That's what all those different pieces are, and they all play an important part in telling the story. But, and here's the big, dummy, thick, clapping thigh but. All right? You are not telling your story. You are a part of a collective telling the same story. And that means your role will change. Your role will be simultaneously 3 different things at once. And this is where things get confusing. Because many of you will be tempted many, many times in the course of role-playing your character to say, I want my character to win. All right, so let's talk about winning. What is winning? Like, I want you to take a step back and really think about it. What is winning? Is it? What is success?
Yeah, what should it be, or what is it? Goal.
No, what is it?
Completing your goals.
Okay, that's one option on the table we have.
I think having fun would be mine. Enjoying myself.
Okay, that's another one. All right.
Achieving the maximum happiness for your character.
There's another thing there.
And others.
All right.
Everyone.
All right. So the first thing that everybody needs to understand is when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about what the player is. So, you know, it's about what the character is. And that is the distinction that nearly every single person fails at to some degree. What you want for your character and what your character wants will not always be the same thing. And it's very hard to differentiate those two.
Yeah.
Because
I had
that
to learn
wall
that
is
pretty
determined not by your
harshly.
character, because your character doesn't exist. You do. So you naturally have a bias as to what it is that separation will ultimately be. And understanding that that bias exists is your first step into really making a good character that can develop with verisimilitude. Now, who here knows what verisimilitude is?
I was about to say, like, I don't know. I've never heard that word.
Okay. Verisimilitude is the fantastical representation of realism. What it means is that when you say something is realistic for this character, that means it is in the verisimilitude of the fantasy setting. For example, I know this character over here is a shaman. It is unlikely that this character can summon a demon. Why? Is it because it's not realistic for him to do it? No, that's not the proper word, because magic doesn't exist. It's not within the verisimilitude of the character, and that's what that means. So you have to determine where your verisimilitude is for your particular character, what it is and what it is not that they can do in any situation whenever determining your natural bias. And once your natural bias has been determined, then you can separate what winning as a character is. Now, winning, of course, is multivariate and will always be subjective to your opinion. So I will give you mine. And spoiler alert, everything that I'm saying, you don't have to believe by any means. This is just based off of my experience. But I will tell you that to me, winning is based entirely on whether or not someone loses. I want you to think about that.
In order to
It's not
win,
cruel.
somebody loses.
Someone loses.
Of course.
But who loses? That's the key.
Who?
Does the villain lose? Does the mentor lose? Or does your character lose by winning? That can happen too. Winning is determined by who loses.
Losing by winning, huh?
Success is determined by what is
Interesting.
unsuccessful. Because conflict is determined by two either ideologies, forces, it doesn't really matter what word you use, two opposing concepts clashing together. And in the infinite battle of storytelling, when a conflict is resolved, how is a conflict resolved? One side must lose. So think about that. And just because you lose doesn't mean you can't win later. That's part of development.
I have a quick question. How would you differentiate success or winning in terms of like beating a villain or a conflict versus like winning in the case of succeeding in your goals of, say, like, I don't know, graduating from college or something? If your character achieves a higher education and graduates, say, have succeeded, quote unquote.
You beat yourself. The ignorant you loses.
Oh.
Simple as that. You kill the weaker version of yourself and replace it with a stronger version. That's literally what your body does when it replaces cells. Granted, it has a process that makes that actually worse, because everyone loses the battle against time, but that's a different pile of shit.
Mm.
Yes, Tiffany, can I help you? I can hear you. Are you about to go to work? I love you.
Is she about to bite you again?
Oh dear. What?
She's going in for a nibble.
What? Oh no.
Hi, Tiffany.
She trying. But anyway, that's my viewpoint. And fuck it, I knew you were gonna do it. Get out of here. I was ready. I had fucking ninja reflexes. Anyway.
Said you deserved it.
She always says that.
Something about walking in on a D&D game.
Anyway, the point is that is my viewpoint on determining success, not just for yourself, but for your character. Something loses. Something is lost. Because victory and defeat they can't exist at the same time. You can say that somebody won a Pyrrhic victory. We won, but at what cost? Cost is different than defeat. Those aren't the same things. But anyway, I digress. When you determine what that bias is for your character, then you can determine what will succeed for them, and therefore development can occur. And then once development occurs, then your character begins their journey. And now I want to talk about the importance of a journey, all right? Your character has to do something. They cannot exist just to exist. Because we don't exist just to exist. Your character face challenges, they overcome them, and then their journey is complete. The character may go through many journeys, or the character may only go through one. The importance of telling a good character is knowing when it's time to stop. When your character's story is told, and you've told it well, then you move on to another. And there are many people that have trouble with that, especially if their character is powerful. So I want to talk to everybody, and this is one of the major points I wanted to hit tonight on the workshop, is the temptation of playing a powerful character. All right? Now, I understand that this coming from me, who plays a powerful character, can seem a bit hypocritical, so I want to be very clear about something. Whilst I believe that Arcadum, the character, is reasonably powerful, he is not amongst the most powerful at all. I was never stronger than Cell. I was never stronger than Azrael. I was never stronger than anybody within my own power ranking. And I lost every fight that I was ever in. All of them. But most people here think that I'm way stronger than I am. Now, part of that is due to the fact that I, as a role player, am pretty accomplished and I have a lot of experience. But many people believe that is because my successes were well defined. There was no question as to what they were, because my losses were well defined. My losses developed my character. My losses made my character more literal and more, well, added credibility to it. So whenever my character was at any point associated with any sort of power struggle, people gave a lot more credibility to that character, even if unfairly they did. So what you need to do, if you make a character, do not be tempted by power. Don't make a character strong just because you want to feel big. Because I'll tell you right now, you won't have anyone to play with. Because people aren't stupid. They'll know. They'll know that's why you're doing it. It may take a long time. You may even be charismatic enough to stay it off. But it will happen. And let me tell you something. A character that isn't played doesn't exist. And at the end of the day, If you look back and you realize that you have nobody to play with, and this character that is so strong and you have no one to play with, guess what? Who do you have to blame? No one but yourself. You want to know why Superman is awful? You want to know why he's one of the least popular characters in an entire comic book telling history in which he is the main frontman? It's because nobody likes a character that can't lose. It took a long time for people to realize that because, in the 50s or whenever the Silver Age came out, nobody knew what to expect in this kind of storytelling. Like, you guys want to go on a trip? Read Silver Age Superman sometimes. People here think they have powerful characters. Silver Age Superman was ridiculous. Stupid. Just nonsense. And it almost killed the comic book industry. Who here, out of all the fucking DC heroes, right? Who here's favorite is Batman? Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah, he's good.
Who here likes or better question, who here likes Batman more than Superman?
Yeah.
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 It's pretty overwhelming. Yeah. If you really hadn't, some of you might not like superheroes, and that's fine. The point is there's a reason for all of that. Nobody likes a character that doesn't lose. So don't make one. And when I say that, don't make a character that loses only in the ways that makes your character better or that you predescribed yourself. No, be truly open to defeat in the truest form, such as being chained again with no way out. Because if you don't, you're not ready to be here. If you aren't ready to have a character that, and I don't even mean death, I mean defeat. True defeat. And if your intention is to try and create an organization of roleplay in which you can be the strongest character or one of the strongest characters with you and your friends who will have monopolized all of that in order for you to tell a story in which you won't lose, that's the same thing. That's just trying to get away with it. And the things I'm talking about is for each and every one of you to take to heart and think about when you make a character. That goes for everybody in chat as well.
I do have a question, though. How do you know when to retire a character? It's like any power level character. How do you know when to retire them? Sure, the story might end, but it might go on, too.
That's an honest question. That question is something that I don't have a direct answer for everyone. But a general term that I can use is when you think of the story, not your character, but of the story, is your character a part of the main cast? Is your character the focus anymore? And beyond all of that, what does your character have to lose? That's the easiest way.
What does it have to lose?
You determine what the stakes are. And if your character no longer has any stakes in the story, guess what? They don't belong anymore. Or at the very least, they take a step back. And then they keep taking steps back until they fade. They'll never be forgotten. It isn't a bad thing. You just tell another story. That's the entirety of our human history is built upon that recycled usage of storytelling. It's the arrogance of thinking that your character will outlast human history. That's the ultimate arrogance, and that will only lead you to despair. It's not something to be feared. It's not something to be resisted. And I'll give you an example of how I knew it was time for me to retire Arcadum. I no longer had any stakes. My character finally got what he wanted. Did I love other characters? Of course. I loved my students. I loved my colleagues from Guardians. I saw injustice everywhere. But it wasn't time for me to stay. It's time for me to go. Because I got what I wanted. I got my freedom. That's how you know. Also, the way you can get to that point is actually having a determinable goal. If you make a character who's just like, man, I just want to hang out, okay, that's fine. Don't expect them to mean anything. But if you make a character with an actual goal, that you want to have emotional investment from yourself and others, then make that goal determinable. Make it attainable. Don't just make it, I want to get power for the sake of power. You know what that is? That's a Saturday morning cartoon villain. You know how long they last?
Saturday?
1 episode.
Yeah.
Then the Power Rangers jump in the Megazord and cut their arms off. If that's what you want to make, go ahead. But if you want more than that, then don't fucking do it and expect it to be different. Because it won't be. So yeah, that's the idea behind that. Now, after you have determined what your character's goal is, then you can start writing it. So I want to talk about backstory, alright? I'm sure everybody here has a backstory for their character, right? Something you've put a lot of time into, something that will guide everything that that character does, at least to some extent, right?
There's a
I'm sure you
couple of
have.
days.
Nobody fucking
Initially.
cares.
Oh boy.
And I'll tell you why. Because when you meet a character, you're not going to ask them for their backstory. That's not something that will matter in the moment, which is when RP happens. What matters is how they react. And if that person wants to know why they react that way, then they will ask them. It will be an organic thing. But generally speaking, the backstory of a character doesn't matter to the story. It matters only what is happening when the story is being told. To be clear, when I talk about backstory, I don't mean stories that have happened before in which everybody roleplayed in. No. I mean story that was told before the story starts. The prologue, I suppose, if you want to call it that. Not a single fucking person really cares about any of that. When my character interacts with Azrael, I don't care if he's the Void. I don't care what his fucking history is. It doesn't matter to me. It's what we're talking about right then. What we know then. The backstory only serves as a tone set and nothing more. And there are too many characters that try to use their backstory to justify how everyone else should react, which that isn't the case at all. Your backstory doesn't give you agency. It gives you a theme, and then you use it. There you go. And when we come down to things like race and ability, those things can also be determined by the backstory, but once again, if you ever want to go through a real hero's journey, you have to do so. And the more powerful your character is, and here's the key, right? The more powerful your character is, the shorter your journey is. And the less time you will spend playing that character, the further away you'll be from the story, all of that. So that's why if somebody plays a character like, oh, just as an example, I'm a Doctor Who fucking some whatever entity. Guess what? Nobody fucking cares. You're a one-hit wonder. You'll come in, you'll roleplay once, and then nobody gives a shit. I know that sounds cruel, but that's what it is. I'm never going to lie to any of you, or anybody in my hand right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if you come into a character that's powerful and just goes around fucking shitting on people, guess what? Nobody gives a fuck. And what did I say earlier? A character that isn't played doesn't exist. Keep that in mind. Anyway, that was the whole temptation of power thing. So now we've established all those things, now we can actually make the character. But how do you make a character, right? Like, what do you even start with? Well, nearly every character has a piece of the person role-playing in it to be the catalyst, because that's just how it works. The more experienced you get, the more levels of detachment you can get, but every character will always have a piece of you inside of it. So, determine what that piece is. What part of your personality do you not like? Roleplay that and see if you can maybe figure out your own shit. It's very cathartic. Or, what part of your personality do you like? Alright, make a character that accentuates that and expands it into a magical and fantastical way. Is there something about your upbringing, like, did you have only one parent? Okay, make a character that's based off of that. where you literally an orphan, go Batman with it. There's a lot of things you can do. The point is you want the idea to be a little bit more organic. And now I want to talk to you guys about anime. And how poisonous that shit is.
Anime equals poison.
I'm gonna take a drink, because I've been talking a lot. Give me a second. Oh boy. Fucking anime, man. Crack open a cold one with the boys. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about anime characters. I want to be very clear. I don't care if you play an anime character. Alright? And since we're speaking specifically about VR chat, I understand the number of these character types versus the ones that don't exist. I get it. I understand. Anime characters look cool. They're fun to draw. I mean, look at this piece. Look at this shit. Look at this. Big old shiny eyes, long crazy hair, impossible proportions. Sure. I get it. Look at me. I look ugly as fuck. I understand. But even if your character is from an anime with 50 plus episodes, you must understand that anime is more, more vulnerable to tropes than anything else. Like, it's probably the most troped up way of storytelling, more than probably any other form of storytelling, and that's already from most storytelling follows the same literary ingredients. They really do. That's how storytelling works. And for some people that works, for some people it doesn't. Does anybody here know why an anime is popular? Like, think about that. What makes the anime you like popular?
Because it's similar to all the other shit.
Usually flashy or a quick grab at attention.
That's what I just
I
said.
mean, there's a whole collective of board of people trying to make it as appealing to the masses as possible.
The hero always wins.
Well, that's existed for a long time. That's why Power Rangers had like 12 million seasons. So, basically,
And still going.
I want to be very clear. I'm not shitting on anime. It has its purpose. But if you make a character, do not base it off anime storytelling. Because anime storytelling is not fluid enough for roleplay. It isn't. Do you want to know why the hero suddenly defied his own fucking cosmology's rule set and stood back up after the villain's attack?
Okay.
Because he did. That's it. Yeah, they might give some shitty explanation as to why, but it doesn't matter. Because that's the point.
Plot armor.
So let's talk about plot armor. It's not a negative thing. Plot armor exists in every fantasy. The genre is called fantasy. It's supposed to be unrealistic. That's what the genre is. You don't watch anime. Okay, maybe anime is kind of a bad, because sometimes people do watch anime for this, but you don't watch something that's fantasy-oriented to see a bunch of people sit at their desks and fucking do accountant work. You know what I mean? You don't fucking do that. The only time you do that if it's like an ironic thing, like playing The Sims and then setting your house on fire. The point is that it's called fantasy for a reason. And plot armor isn't a bad thing. Do you want to know why it becomes a bad thing? It's because it's when it gets egregious. See, because there's only so much that you as a viewer can take off of rules being broken, right?
True.
Before you've had enough.
True, that's why I didn't really
There's only
watch
so much you
anime
can
too
accept
much.
that.
It's just like,
So let's go over some things that most people
I'm
accept.
tired of this now.
Is the hero physically fit? Most of them are, right? There's very few heroes that are fat or out of shape, right? 98% of them, fucking Japanese soy boys or girls, whatever, doesn't matter. See what I mean? Fit. That's the first thing, and that's the grain of salt that everybody takes. Everybody accepts that the hero is physically fit. Think about that. Think about that first level of acceptance, because not everybody here is physically fit. Not in real life. So it's not relatable to you. But why do you accept that? Think about that. Why do you accept it? Why does that not ruin the experience for you? Mind expansion, right? This expands the dong. Alright? That's what that is. You accept that. Now, let's talk about something else. Is the character physically attractive? Ooh, this one gets me.
Yes.
Most of the time, yes. Why is that? Not all of us are physically attractive. I know I'm not. I shatter mirrors.
I beg to differ.
Oh my god, shut up. The point is that they are physically attractive. Right? Exactly. You accept this when you watch that show. But why? And the reason I'm telling you to think about this is that when you make your own character, understand that there's only a certain level of acceptance that the people role-playing with you will accept before they will not role-play with your character anymore. So you have to decide in this great chess game which ones you're going to move forward and which ones you won't. So the ones we just talked about, physically fit and attractive, every single person is that in here because of how the models work. Look at this shit. You don't look like that in real life. That's the point, though, right? You don't fucking look like that. Everybody accepts that. So, everyone accepts that, so you don't have to play the game for that. That's when everybody starts at the median, right? But you have to decide, okay, where is the median, and then how many steps forward are you going to go?
Interesting.
I hope I didn't just confuse everyone to death.
Yeah, a little bit, but...
What did you say?
Anyway, there you go. So now we got over all of that. Now we can actually play our character. Now we've made our character whatever it is. But how do you roleplay a character? Right? What are the steps? Well, there's many different ways to make your character seem different from yourself. You can use a different voice. You can speak with a different enunciation. Now, in VR chat, you kind of have to rely on your voice a lot. Or, if you're mute, your ability to use your hands, or, probably more than anything else, most of VR chat's roleplay is visually accentuated, or focused, right? Because it has to be. Your voice can only tell so much of the story. Not everyone's a voice actor. Not everybody can do accents, especially if they're playing outside of their voice gender. Nobody would believe I'm a woman. They wouldn't. If I was here.
I don't think you're trying hard enough.
None of you have public avatars. I was going to turn into a chick real quick. The point is that the point is nobody's going to believe that, right? There are some people that can't do that. There are some people that are really McFucking good at it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to understand that much of the VR chat roleplay is going to be visually associated, right? That's why models are in such high demand. Models that make you look unique or make you look like something and all of that. And learning to accommodate yourself to the models that you have access to is an important step to starting as a VR chat role player. But now I want to talk about D&D roleplay, where you don't have shit. You know what you have? Your voice, that's it. Get over it.
Oh,
that's
God,
all you
fucking
got.
Preach.
If you can draw your shit. You can't draw, fuck that. You know, you've got your build, and your voice. That's why I always believe that D&D will always be the most intense form of roleplay, because you literally have nothing else but your voice.
Interesting.
But there is a problem with that. Not everybody is charismatic, which means that people that are naturally charismatic to person, their characters will be more interesting because people will want to hear them speak. You guys understand?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep that in mind as well. That whenever you hear somebody talk about it, right, about their character, you have to remember, am I okay with this because he's charismatic? Or am I okay at this because I actually like the character? So this isn't about what you need to do, but this is about what you need to do for others. Now, I want everybody to be, and I'll use myself as an example for this, and I want everybody to be serious and think. Remove our friendship and think. The shit that I did as this character, if I wasn't me that did it, would you have been okay with it?
Hell no.
I don't entirely know what he did,
No.
but probably not.
No, remember, it's not me. It's not my charisma.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Uh-uh.
Who can I use as an example? How about fucking Prophet? No, Prophet's kind of funny.
You mean like if someone tried to take this character concept that you've made and play it for themselves? Like just the concept?
You mean like the big, like the Barstool thing?
No. Remove our meeting completely. You don't know me. You've never met me in any form or shape. And then when I first started playing this character, came up and started insulting people. Yeah. Do you think you would have been okay with it?
Oh my.
Hell no.
No, of course not.
In the moment, no, but
only because
not in the moment.
It very much depends on if I meet you out of character afterwards or something like that, and be like, oh yeah, he's not actually that bad of a guy.
Anyway, the point is.
Was a part then.
The point is that I'm not looking to have everybody's real answer. I just want you to think about the concept. It's the fact that you're thinking about it. That's the purpose. Because whenever your Dagger, come here. Like, just to give you an example, right? If you walk up to somebody and you start role-playing with them, that's a two-way street. You determine the shit you're gonna say. Like, give me an introduction to your character.
Shit.
All right, get out of my face. Sit down.
You missed it.
Sit down.
Oh.
Fucking.
That's the worst example ever.
Have an introduction ready for your character. Jesus Christ.
You need someone? Fine, I can do it.
Bye, come here.
Oblivious.
You please save me.
Hi,
Introduce your character.
My name's Maylin. I'm the manager of the Purple Lotus. What's your name? You kind of look very disturbing.
Yeah, see, look at that. What have we determined right there? Now I want you to listen. No laughing, listen. You've determined the tone of her voice. You've determined that the character is female. Most of that is going to be done visual, but also because the person is. And then you also have the next piece, right? Which is politeness. See all these different things that we've established in one sentence. We've established all of that. Come here. We're not done yet, all right? So when I go, what up, fuck whistle? What have we established? I'm an asshole.
You're an asshole.
I have a good use of insults. I'm a male. I didn't actually listen to her name. You see what I mean? Lots of stuff that we've established. So you want to make sure that the things that you establish with your first introduction, with the first thing that you say, you understand what you're saying to the next person. And in here, all right, understands what?
You're a jackass?
No. Expand. That the person that's talking to her is not this character. And so she needs to realize and really think that because this character is charismatic and could call me a fucking fairy smashing fuck whistle, and I'm okay with it, is it because that the character is somebody that my character would be okay with associating with, or is it because it's Arcadum? Think about that.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
You can go join the rest. Thank you for having a character introduction.
You're welcome, boss.
He's looking at that.
Green-haired fuck.
It's okay, I'm used to being a disappointment to everyone.
Shut up! Anyway,
I approve.
All of you that are laughing, I was really mean to him. Stop being okay.
I'm
with it. I
okay
don't
with
care.
this.
Anyway, the point is, there it is.
We're not in
right?
character. Who cares?
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
I could.
You have to. You have to.
do you
That's
care?
what I'm saying is that when you are role playing, you have to keep that in mind, and many people don't. And I've seen you guys do it. I've watched it happen. So that was part of that particular lesson.
Oh, I think I get it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
No, I just get stage fright easy.
Well, that's another problem as well as stage fright. And unfortunately, the only way that can really be combated with is by gratuitous applications of headbutting.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to fucking do it. There's no
Yeah.
other way to get over stage fright, in my opinion. I mean, you fucking do it, you're terrified, but you just keep fucking go, and you just keep going. And then, you know what happens? You're not afraid anymore.
What about alcohol?
That's not smart.
So speaking of
Bad
experience,
idea.
alcohol in RP is a very bad idea.
Yeah, I know.
What if your character's an alcoholic?
Well, then you don't have to. Oh,
Then
come
be
on.
an alcoholic in character and keep it in the bottle out of character.
Those
Understood.
are my suggestions and my explanation of how you make a character and then how you roleplay it. We also
Nice.
talked about how to end a character.
Yeah.
But as this process has many variable
Nice.
paths, I'm sure many of you have questions in here as well as in my hand. So yeah, let's hear them. Come on, fucks, and let the people that I don't know talk. Because last time we did this, it was just like 3 people talking to me. So come on, if you're here, you got something to ask, go for it. All right,
It's not something I really want to ask, but it's something I would like to say. Improv is a great way to get practice in doing all this. Just start doing shit with people, find someone, randomly do it, pick a profession, pick something, and just start going with it and bouncing things off of each other. And eventually you'll get to the point where all of this comes a little bit more naturally.
Why the hell do you all think I go to the PO?
What?
Because you're drunk?
To
No,
practice?
because it's because I'm. Yes, thank you. Someone got it.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Hey, Arcanum.
Gotta start somewhere.
What do you got?
So I have a question for
Yeah?
an expansion topic about character motivations and
Oh my
inciting
gosh, this
incident,
guy.
maybe.
Okay, what about it? Like how to change them? How to get new ones?
Suggestions for finding them.
Okay, number 1 thing you can do, find love. Most people don't start with somebody that they're in love with, they find them, right? Most people don't make a character that's in love with somebody unless it's like a weird incest thing, but most of the time that doesn't happen. You find somebody. So that's a motivation you're gonna get nearly by requirement, is you're gonna have to find that, right? That's number 1. Number 2, cause. Find a cause to demote to commit yourself to. The dragons are dying. Well, I don't think that's right because my friend is a dragon. Let me go help them. Like what I did is I found students. And I had my own motivations for doing it. Not all of them were, strictly speaking, kind, but they didn't need to know that. Point is, that's what I did. I think when it comes to developing motivation, since we're, doing this in a role play environment with other people, all of the things that happen to your character past your backstory in the RP should be determined by other people's RP. That's where you should draw your motivations from more than anything else. Like, I put my character's entire fate in the hands of my students on whether or not I would keep playing him. That's how much trust that you have to establish with role-playing, and then you have to give it. And to be clear, there's a lot of a confusion of how does trust work, right? Especially in roleplay. How can I trust somebody if they don't trust me? I will tell you right now, the only way trust starts is if you give it. That's the way it has to be. You trust somebody with something, they might burn you, but guess what? You'll get over it. All you have to lose is a few tears. And it'd be worth it for the friends you'll make along the way, trust me. And also all the people you'll kill. Oh, I like that part.
Okay.
Anyway, there you go.
Going off Maya's question, if your character has no interest in romance, what is another, and has a strong thing for justice, any tips for that?
Sure. You have friends, colleagues. Hell, you could even develop a relationship with an adversary. Some of the best pieces of storytelling ever have been between a hero and a villain, specifically between them. A rival, even. You don't have to be romantically involved with somebody to have a meaningful relationship with them.
Yeah, I mean, look at, for example, the Joker and the Batman.
Yeah, that's a good example.
That's probably one of the most iconic relationships in comic books ever.
Yeah. And they've had many conversations with each other. Deep, meaningful ones that, questioned morality itself. You can have those types of motivations, developments, and all of that, and without being in love with someone. Love is just an easy one to do. Because
There's
it's one
also
that...
a case of familial relationships.
That too, yeah. Although familial relationships, generally speaking, don't occur in the middle of RP. That's a backstory thing, because you have a brother because you were born a brother. Now, you could be adopted, make a blood brother, but that's kind of a different thing than strictly what familial is referring to, but that is something else you can have. So, yeah.
I kind of want to swing back to the character creation thing. What if you make a character that's basically committed every cardinal sin of making a character, and you've played it for a while? How would you go about salvaging it? This is just speaking in generalities. I know it's more of an individual case-by-case basis.
That would depend entirely on whether or not you're in an organization, like an organized RP group. If you are, you go to the people that are in charge, because there's always someone in charge. You apologize, you promise to do better, and then you just play it. Something like that can just be taken care of out of character. Just make sure that whenever you do it the first time, you mean it. Because people do not believe in second chances. There are some people that say that they do, or excuse me, third chances. That's what I meant.
Third chances?
Most people will give somebody a second chance. Third chance, not going to happen. So make sure that the first time that any of you do that, if you think you fucked up a character, mean it. Because if you don't, then you're putting your player self on the line. Because then they won't want to roleplay with any character you make. Because you went out of character to ask for forgiveness. You guys see what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So be careful.
I have a question.
Yes, Ribbon.
Is it better, or rather, do you think it is better to stick to a character's originally planned alignment, or let it naturally develop over time?
Alignment is a representation of your character's choices, motivations, intent, circumstances, practices, and interactions. It is...
Pretty much have to stick to it,
in my
I'm
opinion, it is unrealistic to have a set alignment, because nobody's alignment is set. This is something that a lot of people, especially in D&D, make a pretty big mistake, in my opinion, of doing. Your alignment does not dictate your actions.
Yeah.
Your actions dictate your alignment. You want to know why people aren't evil? Because they don't do evil shit. If they do evil shit, they become evil. Clap. It's as easy as that.
Okay.
Yeah. Or my personal favorite, you just slowly start to get more and more bitter. Just slowly, but surely, getting old. You don't like any of the new music? Oh, man. I feel so old.
From your
What's
chat.
up? Oh, is my chat asking me?
good ideas behind making a quality villain or antagonist?
Okay. I've made a lot of villains, and you want to know what the most common attribute they have? Layers. Don't make
like an onion.
I was gonna
well,
say that.
I don't want to use a Shrek example, but pretty much like
But it's a
look,
good example.
if you want to make a villain, like I want you to think, why are villains more interesting than heroes? Because they are.
Okay.
And I give you a perfect example. Name your favorite Disney songs. How many of them are villain songs?
Probably almost all of them.
All
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, villains get the best songs. Why? Because they're more interesting than the heroes. But why is that? Why are heroes not as interesting as villains? They're the main heroes of the story. They're supposed to be you, right?
Because like good villains have this kind of like good villains, you can at least see from their perspective why they believe or do certain things, even if you don't agree with it, and it kind of makes you it expands your own kind of understanding of things.
You're on the right track.
They have to
Yeah,
have
they tend to get
personality
more-
and depth to get to where they are, so that they can
Almost there.
opposed to the protagonist.
They get
Is it
expounded
because-
upon
But they
to give you the
villains
reason.
later from
What's up, Ruben?
Is it because inherently we have a curiosity into how a character could decide to do bad things?
There it is. That's why. And I'll explain in more detail why. Villains are more interesting because it's a more complex question to answer as to why someone is evil as opposed to why someone is good. When you look at what the protagonist does, you don't have to think about what they're doing as much as you do about a villain, because most people are good. So they don't need to have explained to them why this hero is doing good things. You expect it. It would be far more interesting if they didn't do good things, which is why anti-heroes are such a popular thing. But that's not what we're talking about. That's why villains are more interesting, because you have a natural propensity not to commit evil acts because of how society has developed you. So therefore, you're more interested to know why. That's why. So to make a good villain, make that question a head scratcher. And not in the way that it doesn't make sense, but it'll make people think about what they're doing. Yeah, think about that shit.
I guess going from the villain thing, what, in your opinion, makes a good, I guess, anti-hero, since we briefly touched on that?
A hero whose execution is evil. For example, the Punisher kills bad guys. He breaks the law to do it. He kills them when most heroes don't kill. He doesn't try to avoid killing. Well, that's just what I said. A good anti-hero, and what makes an anti-hero, is a hero who uses evil methods. Or uses non-traditional methods. Probably the best example I can really give of an anti-hero, and this is where things get weird for me, is actually from an anime. Vegeta is probably the best example of what an anti-hero can be. If you watch the entirety of Vegeta's development in the natural Japanese, without all the translation errors that can happen, you will see something becoming a villain changing into an anti-hero, into a full-fledged hero, all throughout his journey. That's why Vegeta is one of the best characters in the game and the entire show.
Hell yeah.
What's another example off the top of your head for those who aren't like familiar with Dragon Ball Z?
Okay. Another good example is, let's see if I can pull something from.
Deadpool?
Here, what? No, Deadpool is not an anti-hero. Deadpool is a meme.
God.
But anyway,
I was worried for a second.
A good example is, who here watches Game of Thrones?
Yep.
Right? The Hound is an anti-hero. And his development from a villain into an anti-hero, even in the world of Game of Thrones where everybody's really gray, is a good example of how an anti-hero can develop. Nobody here thinks that the Hound is gentle or kind. But there are many that, especially in the later seasons, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but in the later seasons, there are a lot of people that will not disagree that he cares about Arya. So you see, that's what makes a good anti-hero, is when you can no longer determine the difference between them as a villain and them as an anti-hero. That's how you make a good one. When you can no longer look at them as a villain anymore.
What kind of general actions would you say, or general thoughts or ideals would you differentiate between someone who's good and someone who's evil?
Well, that depends entirely on the society. But I suppose the easiest way to really answer that, the difference between good and evil is based in nearly almost entirely on the moral precedent, the moral cost, and my personal favorite, the burden on society. For example, if you kill a criminal, right? Why is that evil? Because murder is wrong. That's easy. 300 years ago, it wouldn't have been a problem. Yeah. Think about that.
So it's all dependent on the present dictation of morals in whatever group you're role playing in.
Because morals are a production of society. And if you're in a role play group, you have a society. So the morals are determined by that society. What's up, Corin?
Seeing as I'm new here, do you have any tips as to make sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead. It's all right.
Any tips because I don't want to make my character, as you said, too powerful. And I just was wondering if you could give tips on how to balance that out.
First question is, why are they powerful?
I don't want to. Oh, okay.
What is the purpose of their power?
It's the source.
No, not the source. The purpose.
Being taught by a deity or something?
No. That's how. What is the purpose of the character's power?
Why you wrote them to be powerful.
There you go. Why did you write them with any measure of power that they have? Why do they have the power?
Okay.
Because
are
you
they an experiment or something? Something like that?
It's a question she has to answer. It's a question that she has to answer. Because only she has the answer. Once you determine what that answer is, even if you have to think about it, that's fine. Once you determine the purpose of their power, then you can start to establish how to balance it.
Okay.
Yep, that's the first step.
Okay.
Dexter is an anti-hero. Tiffany talking about Dexter in my chat. Man, just because you have a fucking crush on him.
I don't know what that is.
Oh yeah, she's already told me that if he asks, she's gone. So, Which, that's all right. It's okay. It's all right. I understand.
Oh God.
Slightly back on topic. as far as the RP is concerned. I do have a question regarding what happens if your character ends up getting stuck in a rut. Basically, if you were in a good RP situation and then it just immediately dries up and you're kind of stuck and stalled where you are.
Yeah, I was about to ask that.
Well, I would need the exact circumstance to give the best answer, but generally speaking, if that's the case, retcon it if you have to, but avoid that at all costs if you can. Switch to a new RP group, reintroduce yourself, or talk out of character with the people and try to find a good place to put them. Or play a new character. Simple as that. Just gotta do it.
Fair.
I'm
Are
gonna
there
ask an
any-
obvious question. Go ahead.
Or,
Oh,
at the very least, use it. If you're stuck in a rut, roleplay that. Roleplay being in a rut. That's what I did. When my character had no way to get out of the chains, I
Roleplay being
roleplayed it.
in a rut.
I roleplayed depression.
Gotta go hard.
I roleplayed this point where I started
Oh my.
trying to find alternative methods, and it led me to one of the coolest fights in VR chat.
I did that for Vincent. I was in a rut for 3 fucking months. But then I got out of it. And now he's fucking this thing. So that's neat.
Yeah, well,
I don't know what that
me
is
being what
exactly.
I am as well, it's me forcing myself out of the rut. Because
That's also going to the accuser.
You can thank me later, by the way.
What else you guys got?
You wanna go first?
Who's
yeah.
that? Oh, what's up?
Simon?
Go ahead, Loza.
What kind of I guess this is too broad of a question or has broad answers, but what kind of general elements would you say would make an interesting character? Not just being a villain, because villains are inherently interesting, but what would make an interesting character in general?
What's the recipe? I can give you a recipe. Here's a recipe for an interesting, protagonistically aligned character. Choose a vice, choose a virtue. Okay? Choose a personal conflict, choose a hope. And then, choose a little spice. There you go.
That'd be spicy.
There's your character. Vice never lies. Virtue is creepy, fucking mouth-breathing, follows women around.
Wait, you
Wait.
got that backward. You reversed.
Did I?
Yes.
No.
What?
Yeah, I really think you did. I think you did.
No, virtue is supposed to be the good.
Did I?
Did I really? No, but yes.
Yeah,
you understand what I mean.
Maybe that's his virtue.
I mean, that's virtue.
A vice and a virtue can be completely different depending on the side, I guess.
Lots of women.
Not get into that
Wait.
character.
Oh god. This just reminded me of that person who just got stuck with that virtue of small people.
Oh.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of resist video, and I don't want to resist
No,
that.
that's your recipe. That's your recipe.
Don't worry about it.
Your district keeps getting stuck.
All right, what else we got?
Kotick, you had a
What
question?
specific steps would you take to be a mentor character in RP? Okay, so I'm going to talk about this.
Oh no.
Here's... How can I explain this? Arcanum did not start... Well, that's not even necessarily true. I want to talk about how Arcanum became a mentor character. When I first started entering VR chat, I came in with Rob, joining him in his thing, and Rob introduced me as a mentor character because of my actions and getting him together with Stephanie. Because in our own personal history, he has enough respect for me that he would call me that. So, once that started happening, and once my knowledge of D&D and roleplay got out, people started naturally coming to me about that. And this brings me to the hardest part. Playing a mentor character is probably one of the hardest things to actually roleplay successfully, because the player has to have the respect of the other players in order to treat them as a mentor. Because if they don't, then they won't actually be treated that way. You guys see what I mean?
Yeah.
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 I've always thought that the respect people have for me is undeserved, but I have it. So I've been able to play a mentor character. Whereas other people that have stated they want to play mentor characters have tried, and people wouldn't go to them for anything. Or it'd be forced, or it wouldn't really feel right, you know? So to answer your question, that is probably the hardest one to play because you actually have to have a little bit of an out-of-character meta concept behind that as well. That doesn't mean that you can't acquire it in character, but it is probably one of the hardest. It's really difficult for people to roleplay a character that is subservient to another. It is. I mean, if it's not established in their backstory or something already, it would be really difficult for a character to just be subservient to another one. And a lot of people play powerful characters because they don't want to be subservient to other people, because many of you in real life have bosses, right?
Nope, quit my job.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying. Most people have a boss in real life, so therefore they don't want to be bossed around in their fantasy roleplay time, you know, and I get that. I get that a lot. Especially since adventurers, by nearly definition, do not follow traditional hierarchies. So, it's very difficult to play a mentor character. And I personally would never start off with the intention for a character to be a mentor character, because you're probably going to be disappointed. If it happens, embrace it, roll with it. Don't make a character with the intention for that to happen. Yeah, what's up, Brim?
And another thing I would like to add about being a mentor character, don't be one of those people that's, oh, I know everything. Have a specific field chosen that you're good with. And if it gets out that that particular field is needed and someone needs to learn it, let them come to you.
Explosives.
Go ahead, Brim.
What's your advice for situations like if you have taken up the role of a character that was kind of like a slot that was empty that needed to be filled, or like for example, the Archangels group, like they have kind of their like groups of, there's people playing specific sins and people playing specific virtues. If you've for example like taken one of those roles, how do you kind of like go forward from there with that character? Because a lot of times when you do take one of those roles, it inherently just kind of already puts you at like a certain power level, I guess. So like what's your advice for kind of like dealing with that and making sure you don't like fuck up stuff?
Well, let's start with something right now. So, who here believes that power depicts role?
A little bit.
Okay.
Meh.
There's some circumstances where that does apply, but it's not very often.
Well, let's go straight forward. Right. So let's try a different way. Which role out of the 8 do you think requires the most power?
Yeah, mentor, clearly. Or villain, maybe.
Did we ever list off the 8, Arcadum?
I'd be
Yeah,
surprised.
can you
list
go
them off again?
Honestly,
I
I
can
think
list
the
off again.
protagonist role would need it.
No. Because if it's
Go ahead and-
clear who has the most power, then there's no...
At the start,
'Cause
it would probably be the antagonist.
All right, so our 8 are protagonist, which is straightforward, antagonist, the mentor, the tempter, the sidekick, the skeptic, the emotional, and the logical.
Tempter?
No,
The tempter, the tempter is the sidekick to the
Oh, okay.
to the antagonist.
it would either be the
Interesting.
antagonist or the mentor.
I'm
Probably
thinking
usually the antagonist.
probably the antagonist or
Does any of
mentor.
them
I would
have
argue the
most
mentor.
power?
The emotional?
I always thought it was nice to
Possibly.
have them balanced out.
How interesting.
feel like
I don't
in
know,
a
we
good
thought the
scenario,
emotional
there's
needed
not
the most
really.
power.
In a good scenario, there's not really like a. It could, be varied. Like it really depends on the specifics.
It could just be that everyone has the same power level, but it works out sort of
Yeah.
like a Pokemon game where people just.
It's kind of like a rock paper scissors kind of thing. You mean?
Sorta, yeah.
I would argue that a good antagonist doesn't have to be more powerful than anyone else in the story. They just need to
It also
properly
depends
provide
on.
a. Sorry.
It also depends on what your version of power is. For all you know, it could be the logical, because knowledge is power.
Well,
To be perfectly honest with you, I was gonna say power is something that's viewed. I was gonna probably say either the emotional or the logical. Other dagger part of it, probably the
Depends on what your
logical.
definition of
I'm
power
thinking
is,
of it.
yeah.
I mean, like someone could be powerful socially, for instance. Like maybe you're trying to overthrow some sort of like.
Yeah, hence the
figurehead,
social.
but-
I mean the
Yeah.
emotional. Excuse me.
None of them. The story is the only thing with power.
Fucking duh.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll explain to you what that means. The story is the only thing that changes anything. And all the different pieces play their role in making that change, but that's the only thing with real power. There are plenty of villains that aren't stronger than the protagonist. But something that everyone does need to keep in mind is that, generally speaking, good is reactive. Evil is proactive. If you don't know what that means, good, more often than not, does not preemptively stop evil. It responds to evil action. So, in a story, it is the villain that has more power of the story because they act first. And that's it. That's why. That's why the hero's journey begins. That's the catalyst for everything is the villain. That's why the villain has to be your most interesting character. Because a story with a villain that isn't interesting is a story that nobody reads. Since the villain starts everything, it becomes the most integral part. But the villain doesn't have to be powerful. Lex Luthor is much, 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 much weaker than Superman. See what I mean? Doesn't matter. And that's me using Superman, which is awful, as an example.
I have a fairly specific question.
Yes.
As someone who has a lot of experience in DMing for D&D, what do you normally use as a baseline for the Feywild?
Okay, so the Feywild can represent many different things. It can actually represent Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland Feywild, which is, in my opinion, the best version of the Feywild. But generally speaking, the Feywild serves the purpose of the prefecture of nature, the root system for the tree of Yggdrasil, the plane of life in direct opposition to the plane of death, or the negative energy plane, or the Shadowfell, which is its Vancian name. And many other things associated with that is entirely dependent on exactly which cosmology that you use. In the Norse mythology, it could be Alfenheim, the land of the elves. In the Cthulhu cosmology, it could be, what is his fucking name? Hold on. I've got my big chart here.
Azoth.
No.
Big dumb idiot. Fucking, hey, what's up? Everyone's going.
Not as a no, not him. It
I'm joking.
is. Man, I can't remember if it's Shantax or what, but anyway, there's another one in the Cthulhu universe is fucking ridiculous. Don't pay any attention to it. Anyway, the point is, the Feywild can have many different renditions. Most focus that the Feywild is the plane of life, and is more often than not where life actually started. It's the starting point of creation, where the gods or whatever created your life, doesn't matter what it is, basically said, yeah, sure, here's our blank piece of paper, let's write from this corner. In the D&D world that I run, the Feywild is the is the starting point in which the world seed was planted by the Eldar, which came across a different nebula into this particular plane, which is the material plane and the main storytelling plane of Verum. And that's what the Feywild is, and I based it off of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland.
Oh boy.
Clap.
Wow.
Is it Karkos? Are you sure? Fucking Cthulhu.
Question. Any tips on getting into roleplay groups?
Ask.
Well, fuck, I'm stupid.
I mean, it sounds like an obvious answer, but there's so many people that don't ask. They just don't. Because they're like, well, I don't know who to ask. Ask everyone. Just fucking do it. You ask. And if you ask enough people and you can't find anything, make your own. If you have
any tips for creating roleplay groups, then?
Yeah. Know what you're talking about. If you make a roleplay group, if you are the creator, you have to know what the world is. You have to know everything. Because the buck stops with you. If you don't know, then no one else is going to know. So if you're the creator or the creators, if you get a bunch of people together, then you together better know what's going on. Because if you don't, your shit's going to unravel like a badly fucking sewn piece of yarn scarf in a fucking winter blizzard with me laughing at you. Neck's gonna get cold.
Solid advice.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, across watching different people's VODs and throughout role-playing, I've noticed that generally there's characters are split into two different kind of personalities. There's, active and reactive. There's people that sort of just hang around other active people and react and are sort of the followers. And then there are people who actively go out to seek things that they want or seek to go help other people. And they are the people that are leaders. They have their followers. For a person that is a leader and perhaps wants to roleplay a follower but doesn't know how, or is a follower and wants to roleplay a leader but doesn't know how, what would be the kind of advice for switching into an active or passive role?
Now we're entering real life psychology, and I am by no means qualified to discuss that. But I will tell you the best advice that I can have, just to be honest with what you want. If you know that you're one of the leaders, find someone else who is a leader and ask if you can play that character type with them. Or elect someone from amongst you that you will infuse with your leadership personality. That everyone will then follow you to follow them. It depends on how much actual leverage you have and influence you have in your social paradigm. And if you're a follower and you want to be a leader, which is probably the hardest thing to do, I don't have any good advice for you. Just try, and don't stop trying. That's the only real advice I can give you, because you miss every shot you don't take. Sounds like a Sunday school answer, but that's the best I've got for you.
They don't talk about shooting in Sunday school, sir.
I don't know what kind of church you went to.
Oh god, flashbacks are already.
From Skullmancer. How would you suggest going about making a new race or character type in an RP world? I think I made him fold up.
Sorry, I was cranking back a Dr. Pepper.
Oh, tasty.
Alright.
I want one.
Did you just throw the can?
Yeah,
Why
throw
not?
my cat.
Did the cat dodge? The cat?
No, I hit him. He doesn't care. Fat fuck.
Well, just... Okay, then
care.
yeah, I'm all for it, fat fucker.
He doesn't take it. He doesn't take any damage. He's just laying there. He fell asleep when I hit him.
That's what mine does.
Anyway, how do you make a new race? Well, every race serves a purpose in any sort of RP world. Most of the different races will serve all sorts of different purposes. You have to figure out what it is that the race that you want to make and whether or not there's a purpose being served by another race. For example, in D&D, what are elves? Elves are the oldest. Elves are the ones with the long memories. Elves are the ones that create the longest histories because of that. What are dwarves? The craftsmen, if you're following Tolkien. But on all of that kept in mind, what is a human? Why, that's you! And it's just as boring as you are, so play a fucking another race.
I don't wanna.
Thanks for the win.
Fuck you.
But anyway, the best advice that I really have if you want to play a new race, you have to determine its history, its sort of racial calling, like what is its storytelling trait, and you just go from there. Especially in VR chat, because in VR chat you can be anything because all the rules are very loose in the first place. They just are. They're really loose. Like what the hell is this thing? Look at this fucking thing. Who cares?
I have no idea what you are.
Nobody cares. Does it talk? Look at that. See? That's what I'm talking about. You can be anything. You can be whatever this thing is. You can be this. You can be a fucking old man with a gun. Like, it doesn't matter.
He has a gun? What?
He's crouched and he looks like he's got a gun.
Oh.
God, I was in danger.
But anyway, races can really be anything that you want them to be, so just make them. The only time you really have to worry about making a race is if you've got like a structured environment, and that's really when it matters the most. But yeah.
I do have another question.
Oh.
Yes, Ribbon.
I'll let them go. I'll let them go
Who's that?
first.
Who's back there?
Kelp.
What?
My question was, is there any tropes or situations you would recommend avoiding to newer role players or even more experienced role players?
Oh my god. You're gonna make me call people out. Alright.
If I did something wrong, call me out. I'm ready for it, Chief.
I'm gonna turn on my fan because it's hot in my room. So if you hear that breeze, that's me in a wind tunnel, slowly dying of my own juices boiling me alive.
I know.
You mean tropes in VR chat? Like specifically to this medium?
I mean tropes in general, but this medium works fine.
That might be a bit too broad for me to really go over here, but
I don't know, pick someone out.
Any character that uses sexualization as a weapon is probably going to be very, very uninteresting. Because what will happen is a lot of people will either take it to mean that it's a reflection of the player, or they will misinterpret its use. And considering, especially in VR Chat RP, how a majority of the character avatar models are female, and a very large percentage of those female avatars are highly sexualized, you will basically not stand out in any way. And if your purpose is to tell a character that is interesting, a character that is bland and samey will not be as interesting as it could be. Another trope that you want to avoid is revenge. Especially in VR chat. I don't know what it is, but so many characters I've seen follow revenge. Like, revenge is their whole motivation, and it is honestly just very tired. There are so many other ways to give your character motivation other than revenge. That doesn't mean that you just shouldn't use revenge at all, but you really have to think about what you want it to be. Yeah. I guess another thing that I would really point out is don't try to make an anti-hero. Too many people try to make anti-heroes, and they fail spectacularly. Because you don't make an anti-hero develops. So start with a hero, or start with a villain. And if you happen to become an anti-hero, then good for you. And that doesn't mean that everybody that's playing an anti-hero is more interesting than those that are not. Like, there's a lot of people that call Arcadum an anti-hero, when he isn't. My character is an antagonist. He always has been. But I did put on the anti-hero hat for a little bit at some different points of the story, but I've always been a tempting demon. Technically speaking, my official role I would consider myself to be as tempter in service to greater evil. But I became a mentor. And that's another thing, too. Just because you are on one side of the moral fucking line in the sand doesn't mean that your position won't shift. There are many different grades of many different degrees of gray in which people can roleplay in. I wouldn't say other than that there's really any tropes to avoid. Just don't define your character by tropes. Because once you start doing that, then you begin to make exceptions. And you begin to accept certain things about them. Don't do that. I don't. And that's why I ended up with a pretty unique character, is because I didn't say, oh, I'm being this trope or I'm being this trope. I didn't worry about it. I made it organic. And it naturally developed. Because I want to be very honest with everyone here and everybody in my hand. You will never make a character that is original. You need to abandon that entire concept. It doesn't exist. You won't tell an original story. Your character isn't original. It's impossible. Because every single story and every single character is made of the same literary ingredients that our entire human history has developed. But let me ask you this. If two different chefs make a risotto, are they using different ingredients? They could, but if you give them the same ingredients, the difference between the two of them can be night and day based off of the execution. That's how you should look at your character. That's how you should look at your story. Because they're all going to use the same literary ingredients, but the difference between a good story and a bad story is the execution. Simple as that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for people who are uncomfortable or unfamiliar with magic, but who want to start to involve a character that has magic?
Play a sorcerer. More importantly, play power inconsistent, which means you don't have any control over your power. Because then you don't have to know anything about magic because you don't know anything about magic. You just have it.
Wild magic.
That's what you do.
Okay.
All right, anybody in chat have any questions? I've just kind of been yakking. Tips on creating a character with amnesia? You want to know what the best way to do that is? Have somebody else write your character's fucking backstory. That's the best way to do it. Have somebody else write the backstory for you and only give you pieces of it.
Incredible.
That's the best way to
That
do
would
it.
be so fun.
Would Handsome Jack from the Borderlands series be a good example of a tragic antagonist? The problem with Handsome Jack is he's come down with a terrible case of the Deadpools. So it's really difficult to sympathize with that kind of character due to his entire history. But I do think the way that he was portrayed in the Telltale game series was pretty spot on for a tragic antagonist. The problem is that Handsome Jack is a little too Deadpool. So let's talk about Deadpool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deadpool is an example of a character who has made a success out of something that you are not supposed to do. You're not supposed to break the fourth wall. That's why it's so jarring when you do it. But Doctor Strange, who is the Sorcerer Supreme, told him that he was a comic book character. Only he, and I believe 4 other characters, know that. So that's why Deadpool does the things that he does. But, make no mistake, Deadpool is a hero. He's not an anti-hero. Just because he's wacky and he kills bad guys, he's not like the Punisher. He is a hero. He's just stupid and insane. But I would officially classify him as a hero, mostly because he doesn't struggle with things. That's the thing. Like, an anti-hero has to be somebody who struggles with his methods. You know? Deadpool doesn't. And no, arguing with yourself doesn't count, because he does that because he's insane, not because he's struggling with a moral quandary. But I could go both ways on that if I'm honest. Thoughts on creating an immortal human with no powers other than experience. God, I hate words like immortal. Jesus Christ. Okay, you know what? All of you people are going to get a free drink from my cup of wisdom. Do not ever use absolutes. Ever. In any of your RP. Do not say endless, infinite. None of that shit. Unstoppable. You want to know why you don't say that? Because all that shit is meaningless in here. Nobody has absolute power in VR chat. Nobody does. And the sooner everybody understands that, the better it will be for everyone. And I know that immortal can mean that you don't die from aging, which is why I'm not making a huge deal about it. But there are people that will use immortal in the other definition that you cannot die. Arcadum, depends on which Deadpool. I'm talking about, like, the iconic Deadpool is not a bad guy. That's what I'm saying. Don't deal in absolutes. Nobody has absolute power. Period. So if you roleplay with like a fucking archangel or some shit, right?
Oh god.
They don't have absolute power. My character doesn't have absolute power. I would never say that he has absolute power at all. Never has. Never will. The only thing that is absolute in VR chat and roleplay is potential. That's the only thing that's absolute. Every character has potential to be a better version of itself. Because every character is on a journey. Because if your character's not on a journey, they're not in a story. Clickety clack.
But I want to have a character that makes the best pie. What the fuck?
Absolute power can be dull if done wrong.
It can be
Omega
dull
law.
even if it's done right.
Absolute power is dull. That's why Superman sucks. And to be clear, since we're playing a game, meta rules can be absolute. Sure, they have to be. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about fucking no character in a shared roleplay experience has absolute power. If you're a novelist and you're writing something, that's different. But in a shared world where we all roleplay together, that kind of thing isn't possible. In a D&D game with a dungeon master, yes, that could be possible, because there's somebody who has an agreed upon absolute power, which is the dungeon master. They are an unbiased storyteller. Remember what I said earlier? Where does all the power lie?
In the story.
In the story. That's why the DM is allowed that power, because they are the arbiter of that story. No character in a shared experience like this has absolute power. And if you meet anybody that tells you that they do, you need to inform that person they are not ready to roleplay here. And that's not me just saying that because it's my opinion. I treat that as a true fact. They're just not ready for it. And they shouldn't do
Roleplay
it.
is a story that is created by and shared by all of the people involved. There's no one, or at least in this in non-closed roleplay communities, it's created by everyone, and there is no top power. So there is no one to agree upon a set absolute.
Exactly. Like, and somebody in chat's like, what about One Punch Man? One Punch Man doesn't have absolute power. He doesn't. Saitama doesn't have absolute power. If he did, then he would be able to find an enemy that can beat him. Think about that.
Oof.
He doesn't have absolute power. And furthermore, as another example, the story isn't about Saitama, it's about Garo. Or whatever it is, the fucking robot boy. Genos, that's his fucking name.
Yeah, Genos.
Yeah. Genos is going through the hero's journey. Genos is what the fucking story is focused on, not One Punch Man. One Punch Man is more of a storytelling mechanic, given a personal form. And also, he's a joke. It's a parody. So it's not at all a reasonable example at all.
I remember reading somewhere that the author uses One Punch Man to end fights once everybody else has already lost. Like, if it needs to wrap up the story.
Yeah.
He always shows up fucking late.
But anyway. That's not really even relevant, because One Punch Man is an anime that doesn't have a shared roleplay experience, which isn't what we're talking about. One Punch Man works because it's a fucking anime that writers have agreed on that has no improv roleplay interaction. There's no... That's not the kind of storytelling we're talking about. If we were talking about novelistic writing and, like, script writing, that would be something completely different than what we're talking about. We're talking about role-playing. And in a roleplay setting, absolute power can exist. Not unless it's an agreed-upon arbiter. They just can't. You know how I know it doesn't? You know why it can't? How many times throughout the last 2 years, or a year and a half since VR chat got popular, have you guys seen drama between organizations? Drama between people, about people fighting and the resolution not being clear.
Oh boy.
That's why it can't exist. Stupid heads.
Stupid heads, yeah. Yeah, we big dumb.
I tried to fix it. It didn't work. I tried to get everybody together. Not really a lot happened from it, and that's fine. That's why it doesn't work. Tatum, can you discuss roleplay in a peer-to-peer forum versus in an audience? Like, what do you mean exactly? Somebody was asking something. Well, I was looking at my hand.
It does me.
What's up, Ribbon?
What would you suggest for someone who has put down a character with an unfinished story but wants to bring it back?
Roleplay it. No character story is finished. That's the point of why you're role-playing them.
I see.
No story is finished. Anybody who's role-playing a character is role-playing their story. It's not finished, it's being written right then. That's what makes it all fun, because you don't know what it's going to be. It could be anything. You could fall in love with a demon from the Bronx. Anything could happen. Dagger could be interesting.
Oh my god.
Oh, come on, that was a light roast. I haven't roasted this whole time. Dagger, what's your question?
The question I had. The question I had was, what's a good, I guess, how to say, a good leveling system on how to progress your character's powers?
Yes. How does development happen? Well, this is why it's so important you don't start with a strong character. Because, all right, come with me on this. You start here, right? And this is the top. How much do you have to go?
Literally
How much? Go ahead, check it
nowhere.
out. How far can you go?
Nowhere.
Go get in there.
Pretty good
Get your
distance.
hands in there. Figure it out. Just figure it out. Like, show everybody. You go from there, okay? And then you go up. Go ahead. You're developing. Wow, you get up there. That's a lot. That's a lot of room. Like, move that shit around. Look at how much room you have in there, right? Like, slap the top and bottom of my hand. Go ahead. Slap them. This is an important demonstration. Just fucking start slapping them. Look at that. He's going crazy, right? But if your character starts up here, and this is the top, how much room you got? Can you even get in there?
Yeah, not much.
See if you can get a finger in there. No, get in there. Just wiggle. Just wiggle in there.
Oh god.
Oh my god.
Yeah, not a lot of room. And there you go. Don't start with a powerful character. Don't do it. Fucking hand. Don't do it.
No.
Now, as for how
Now
you
with a
develop,
character that is.
you have to determine what.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but you were about to start on that. I was going to ask, like, for a low character, what's a good, because for me, I'm always thought of a good story to slowly build up, but I know every now and then there is the instant power-ups, the given rewards, things like that. So I'm trying to think of when it's a good time to do what and where.
All right. There's three different kinds of power-ups, right? There's external, internal, and story. All right? External means interaction with your surroundings, right? Like, fucking hands. I'm standing up. Fucking sensors. All right. Talking to these people. Fucking humping that wall. Whatever you gotta do. That's external. They change you and make you better. Internal means realizations, working through all of your problems. Like, I don't have any friends, but I don't need them because I'm my own friend. Your power increases there. And story represents events that have nothing to do with you changing your power. Such as, boom! Now you have a third arm. See what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, how do you handle that? That's a good question. People have their own different ways of doing it, but the best way to do it is to determine what your challenges are. If you want to develop slowly, then start with small challenges. You want to develop quickly, start with bigger challenges. But remember what we talked about. See that?
Yeah.
Put your hand on the top of my left hand. Make it go up a little bit. This little. See, look at that. Look how much further you have to go. All right. Now fucking shoot that shit up here. Look at that. You don't have much further to go, do you?
No.
That's what you do. I know that seems like a really simple thing that everybody knows, but a lot of people don't follow it because they lack one thing. And you know what that thing is? Discipline. If you don't have any discipline, then everything we've talked about here is pointless. Let me ask you a question. Do you make your bed every morning?
Fuck no.
Why?
Every morning?
Why not?
Work. I don't like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
Discipline. Fucking discipline. Fuck. Ow. Shit.
You good?
Discipline.
I think
Why is it always?
Are you all right?
Someone hitting their wall is just universally funny.
You're all laughing. I'm asking if he's okay. God damn.
No, I'm
He's
fine.
fine.
I'm made of iron and hate.
Made of iron and
Broke his hand.
Mostly hate.
I can relate on the hate thing.
For information gatherers, for
And
example, my
depression.
character uses recording equipment.
Shut up, we
How
don't
do you
talk about
properly
that.
document things recorded or expand/evolve that equipment without crossing into metagaming?
Huh?
All right. That sounds like a challenge based off the technology we're using. You could actually record the conversations, go back, write transcripts of them, and then put them on attachments on your character sheet, which you could then make reference to by bringing up your menu while role-playing. That's really elaborate, but that's the way you could do it, and it wouldn't be metagaming because you would have recorded it.
Does someone want to translate that for the idiot in the room, aka me?
They're essentially saying, okay, how can I
playing a
develop
spy.
my... Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
He's playing a spy, and he wants to know how he can keep track of all the things that he would be recording and keeping track of without metagaming, and I just gave him an example of how he could do it.
Okay, then the idiot now understands. Thank you.
In short,
None
write it
idiot.
down.
I have another question.
What's up?
So from learning about like other people's characters and trying to make a character, I noticed that a lot of the generality of a character's motivation is often like they want their problems fixed, like they like for example this character like was possessed and they wanted to be unpossessed. They wanted to find someone that could help unpossess them. They wanted their problem fixed. But clearly having someone's problems fixed by another character is not the only motivation that exists. What kind of other like general motivations would you say could be used for other characters?
Well, there are conflicts that exist for each character, right? And there's different forms of those conflicts. Like they could be external, they could be internal, or they could be story. Like, for example, just kind of shooting it here. I think Dagger isn't my friend anymore. That's an external conflict, right? The internal conflict is whether or not I should care about that. And then the story conflict is that if I'm not friends with him, he would die. Like by a curse or something. You see what I mean? Like, in that one instance, we have 3 different layers of interaction on the same conflict, and the conflict is our friendship. That's just an example. So it's more important as to what the different like facets of that conflict really are and what they'll interact with. Generally speaking, a conflict is more interesting the more facets it has. But the more facets it has, the greater its solution must be. So if you're trying to tell a story and you want to have multiple arcs, you don't want to have a huge conflict that you resolve because your solution must be equally as large. And so if you use a huge solution, then you've developed a lot of your character in order to get to it, and then you don't have another, we got this problem again. So it's a balancing act. You have to kind of, figure out what your balance is going to be. And something else that's important, there's also character loss, characters losing things. Generally speaking, nobody goes backwards on the power scale because their character always moves forward because time is linear, or rather, time moves forward, doesn't move backwards. Now, I don't care if you use time magic, shut up.
Time magic is
okay?
forbidden.
You don't fucking do it. You just move forward, always forward. So that's kind of how storytelling has to work. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. I felt like I was rambling there.
I have another question.
Yes!
What do you do if you have a character who doesn't seem to be, like, sticking to the wall? Is it better to make a new character or try to revise that character to better fit?
Revise. At least you should I like to follow the rule of 3. Try 3 times with big revisions, and if that doesn't work, make a new character.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it, because I don't want people to not have fun doing this by playing a character that just isn't working for whatever reason. So play a new one. Play until you find something that works, and then learn from the things that didn't work. And then, from then on, you wouldn't have that problem as much anymore. And another problem is it may not even entirely in any way be your fault either, because it depends on, there's so many variables, because you're dealing with other people that are role-playing. Like, some characters, even if you do a good job on them, won't work.
Mhm.
It just won't. So, you know.
Is there
pretty
any
flat.
way? Is there any way to determine what those variables that are missing might be?
Experience. You just gotta live through it. I think if you gave me specific examples, I could sit down and I could write the ways around it, but that won't really be useful to you. I'm a very big believer in teaching people to fish, not giving them fish. So, and that's the best way to do it, is to just gain the experience, and the only way you do that is by trying and failing. Or succeeding. But trying. Yeah. Whoa, I almost tripped on my own pant leg. Flew through my window.
Oh, no.
Cut myself to pieces. Oh, man.
I have a
Then I'd
question.
finally get what I deserve. What's up?
Tragedy.
What dictates character progression? Is it the universe that your character's in? Is it yourself? Is it the people around you? I know that might be a strange question.
No, that's not. How do you know if your character is developed? And more importantly, what determines it?
Yeah,
Well,
and how
generally
slow or
speaking,
fast you go.
you know when your character has developed. Normally, that's not really a question, because you know. But remember, this is a group telling thing, so how does all these fucking other people know? Well, the best way to do that is to determine reactions. Get a dry run, meet new people, and then compare them to the reactions of the other people, compare them together. And then just do that. Generally speaking, knowing whether or not a character has developed and how far it's developed is entirely dependent upon the story that is currently being told. That will always be your measurement system. But that's only going to take you so far. Because what you have to understand is that your development levels between those 3 branches are not, they're not required to be the same. So you may feel inside that your internal development is low, your external development is high, and your story development is medium. But if you must choose which one of those 3 that wins, the story always wins. Always. But the other 2 are important. There you go.
Okay.
Dab on them. Okay. When a character has a type of resurrection, such as a phoenix, what would be a good way to give them setbacks or punishment for... Where's my wall? Oh, there we go.
Oh no. Oh dear. Give me.
Okay.
Simple answer, don't.
I can relate.
Okay.
It'd be cool if you had Flowerwalk on it.
If you have a character that can avoid death by either having a resurrection mechanic or something else, then you need to make sure they lose something real. Something real. I will tell you this, I have only ever liked one character in all of pop culture, video games, anything that I've played that has had an immortality mechanic and that I've liked. I've only liked one. And it was by a JRPG called Lost Odyssey.
Oh, Lost
and
Odyssey.
For those of you that have never played Lost Odyssey, Lost Odyssey, the main cast has immortals and mortals. Now, when an immortal dies, they don't die, but they lose all the memories of the life that they lived until that point. So that means they forget every person they loved, children they've had, friends they've made, who they were. They start completely from the beginning again. Every time. And the way that Lost Odyssey portrayed it, which is why it's my favorite RPG of all time, is incredibly tragic and horrifying. Immortality is without a doubt a curse. And for it to be a curse and not just edge credit for you to pay people with how edgy you are, you need to actually play it. So essentially my advice is if you play a character with a resurrection mechanic, they die. Because if you lose all of your memories, are you the same person you were before?
No.
You're dead. So it looks like you died anyway. That's my advice.
How far do you go in for the punishment, out of curiosity?
The punishment needs to match what death would be. That's hard. It needs to be serious. Or, and this is second place for me. There was a book I read called, man, what was it called? It's by Brent Weeks. Oh man, what was it called? I can't remember what it's called, but it's by Brent Weeks, and essentially the god of death gave the main character the ability to resurrect himself. But what the main character didn't know was that all magic has a price. Every time he resurrected, somebody he knew died. Oh. That
Life for a life.
Life for a life. Life must pay for life. And that was the whole concept in the book. But the character didn't know that, so he became reckless with his life. He became completely reckless he would fight enemies that he would be defeated by. He died like 3 times in a row acting reckless, and he found out that his mother died, his uncle died, and his best friend died. And the god of death informed him that's what happened. Because the god of death doesn't have to tell you anything. But he did because he wanted to see what he'd do. So then from that point forward in the book, he treated it like he couldn't resurrect. Because the cost of death was even more so than death itself. So he actually became kind of a coward. He wouldn't take big risks. So, to me, that would be an acceptable form of resurrection. However, the problem is that who are you going to know in VR chat? Other people's characters. And they're gonna die if you die and resurrect. Unlikely, you know what I mean? So it's not really possible. Was that The Way of Shadows? I think it may have been. I cannot remember the name of the book series.
Actually, this sounds really familiar.
Kill off NPCs your character knows? Yeah, because that has weight. Please. That's not good enough.
Goodbye, my favorite pets. I know you well.
And please understand, everything I'm talking about is not in reference to D&D or any of that, in which you can maybe have a little wiggle room. It's to VR chat. That's what we're talking about, so stay relevant. Kill off players from the character's real life. Got him.
So, I got a question for you.
Hold on, I have to think an AC-130.
Someone just bombed him.
Yeah, someone bombed.
Yeah, thanks.
Glory 7.
Last time I did this in VR chat, I got 237 subs. It was ridiculous. So, please control yourselves. Jesus Christ. I don't want to spend like...
Did I hear someone say subtrain?
2,000 fucking minutes thanking people.
I have a question. I don't know if it'd be able to be answered accurately, though.
What's up?
In terms of like not just about the immortality, but related to it, how would you be able to define what would be a proper sort of punishment or negative event in someone's life and have it actually have weight. Because I've seen some people make like orphans, and like, yes, it's sad because they don't have parents, but they don't really
How
have
sad?
weight to it. Yeah. Like how
Well-
can you make something properly sad instead of just theoretically sad?
That's going to come down to RP ability mostly, is your ability to convey how much it means to you to make other people emotionally invested. Like, for example, I'll use Arcadum's character as an example. I'm by no means a emotional character in terms of, like, I start crying and shit or anything like that, but my character is a sad character. And people know that because of their interactions with him through, specifically, the moon. The whole big thing that I did about explaining what the moon was and what it meant to him. And the reason that people were able to connect with that is because I was able to convey just how sad it was to the character. Now that's going to come down to that charisma shit again, where you're able to convey the feelings and have other people, you know. Unfortunately, the weight of your RP will be dependent upon your skill at it. There's only so much arbitrary weight you can add to it, because it's going to come down to your ability to convey it. But to me, you have to really believe that it's bad. Like, you, the player, have to really believe it, and then other people will start believing it. Yeah. Also reference it. Not constantly, but make it something that does come up, you know? And not by you either. Like, by something that will happen. Like, for example, the first time I mentioned the moon was whenever we all stood out in the grass on that one map, and I was just looking at it, and people started coming in, and I was talking about it. And then other people would bring it up, and then Miss Universe summoned it whenever I was chained up for the second time. You know, we had a back and forth thing. I made Christy cry. It was hilarious. You know, it's all kinds of good stuff.
Got him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what you have to do.
You shed some tears too, bitch.
I like
You cried too, Arcade.
I like to think of it in terms of taking something that your character uses, not you, but your character uses to define themselves. Like, for example, for May, the thing I know that I would do if I needed to punish her and make her suffer would be to have her be thrown out of Purple Lotus and be banned from it. That would mean everything to her, because that's how she defines herself.
That would be hilarious.
That would be hilarious.
No, it wouldn't. It'd be sad.
That's a
I'm
good
sorry,
way.
I'd
Yeah,
laugh.
for you. That's
Yeah.
look, if you guys need to rank how sad something would be for your character, tell me and then judge how much I laugh. I'm glad to be of service.
Oh God, me stop drinking permanently.
But yeah, that's a good example. I actually think that would be believable because you're very connected to it. You're in a position of staff. You define your whole character around it. So if you were banned from it, that'd be pretty big and be a believable thing. But the only reason you got that, and here comes that thing with like experience and like skill, is that not only are you good at conveying that, but more importantly, you have a history that's already well established. Like, a lot of people want to enter and they want to make emotional waves and have people like their character at the fucking conception of the character. That shit doesn't happen in any story that you watch. I mean, that you read, any show that you watch, any anime that you watch. That shit doesn't happen at the start.
It's like having a stranger change your life.
Yeah, exactly. And the only reason they would even have any sort of thing like that is to develop theme, not character. Like, the emotional payoff is later. The stakes are established at the start. And yeah, there are a couple of exceptions that have tried to do it, and they had mixed success. But that's what it all is, you know? Especially in a group role-playing environment. Like, you want to judge how much effect it has on your character? Look at other people's reactions based off of it. That's how you know how much emotional investment you have. It's what everybody else reacts to, because that's the only measurement you really have in terms of emotional investment, is how other people react, because they become invested in your character. Like I'll give you an example. When Aegis and Purple Lotus and other friends were all preparing to fight my character, there was a discernible tenseness in their meetings. in the different RP groups and all of that. It was very tense hearing people talk about what they would do. When I believe it was Sachi and Oblivious and Sci-Fry were actually discussing whether or not they would release my chains and whether or not they should. Sachi was like, we shouldn't at all. Like, they had a whole back and forth, a real conversation about it, and it was invested because of that history that we had made. Some of these things are only possible after enough time has passed. And while I don't believe that a character's power is determined by how long you've been role-playing it, their impact most certainly is. I hope that helped.
So
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it important to have variety in the different types of characters that you roleplay, or is it okay to play one type of character multiple times?
That depends entirely on you. Are you going to get bored? Are you going to bore other people? I'm always of the opinion that you should play other characters. You should expand your horizons and develop your skills. But there are people that like to play it safe, or just like to be comfortable, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But if given the choice of which one I would suggest, I'm always the one to explore new horizons and expand. Like, if I didn't do that, I'd only have Arcanum. I wouldn't have Methuselah Honeysuckle, everyone's favorite character.
Oh, God. I mean, to be fair, I want someone that does.
Arcanum, I do have a question for you.
Yep.
In regards to all of the various groups that are all doing various different role plays, as a new person coming into it, there's information that's out there that has very legitimate meaning and has actually happened, but coming into it as a new player, and as someone who doesn't watch all of the RPs, for example, how do you go about creating a character that doesn't conflict with existing history? And
okay, you don't.
Thank you.
You can't. You should not let that control what kind of character you make. You see, if you make a character like, okay, let's jazzercise, right? There are a lot of demons in this shit. All right? A lot of them. If somebody says that they are Lucifer, the Lord of all demons, what is that? What did we discuss earlier? What is that? Anybody know what that is?
A Superman.
No. Almost, though. It starts with an A. Hey, an absolute. Exactly.
Absolute.
If somebody says they're Lucifer, the Lord of all demons, they are automatically wrong. Because that's an absolute. You can't be that. Because there are demons that have no association with the biblical or the Gregorian representation of heaven and hell. Hell, they could be a Jewish, what is it, the Jewish religion, automat, what are those things called? The big robots? The clay golems? Fuck, what are those things called?
Clay golems?
They could be that. That's a whole other different pantheon, and that's like their demons or whatever, so it could be anything. The point is that if you make an absolute something like that, then you don't have that. So therefore, if there is no absolute of anything, you can be a demon of anything, because you can. Now, how do you integrate with that? That's partially on you and partially on them. It's a community. It's a collective, project to come halfway and go, what kind of demon are you? You're here, I'm over here, this is how we happen, and that's how it works. Now, personally, that's why I think that every RP group needs RP referees that talk with each other to determine this shit in an unbiased manner. There is not enough of those, and I don't have the time to do it for everyone. So, there's that. But, that's really the way it is. Hope that helped.
To some degree, yeah.
I have one. This one's going to be really broad, unless you want me to be specific, but I see an OOC. Bleeding. People misunderstanding.
Out of
character.
character.
Just 1 second. 1 second. I gotta I just got gifted a bunch. My sub sounds are playing.
I almost want
just.
It's fine.
I fear we will be homeless. Hold on, I have so.
That's why I'm waiting till the end.
Slidey, slidey. Slidey, slidey. Slidey.
You gotta teach me.
Okay, please go ahead.
Sorry.
It's probably the flying walking
I've
animation.
seen OC bleeding, people misunderstanding you for your character, vice versa. People in the chat going, I can't tell. I don't know. I guess just the generalized. Oh my goodness, fella.
Okay, how to keep the separation of OOC and IC clear? Is that what you're asking?
Pretty much, yeah. And let others know that you are having the separation properly, because some people might mistake it as like, oh, they're not doing a good job, but they don't, you know what I mean?
Well, this is a two-way street once more. Let's say you're streaming it, right? You have to put that shit in your title, roleplay. You know, you have to take the certain steps needed to inform people of that. And you also have a responsibility as the role player to make the difference between your in-character self and out-of-character self difference. So that's why you know, this is Arcadum, and this is me. You know, there is a distinctive difference. Now, not everybody can do voices, so it's important that you focus on little things like enunciation, phrases. You know, there's a lot that you can do. If your in-character voice and your out-of-character voice are exactly the same, that's on you, not the viewer. Because then they don't know. Especially if your character talks exactly the same as you're in real life. You know what I mean? Like, it is role-playing, and there has to be a certain level of, if Matthew McConaughey starts talking about vehicles and driving, right? And then he suddenly is in a superhero costume, but is still talking about vehicles and driving, there's going to be confusion. Like, why did he make another one of those commercials? You see what I mean? Oh my god, hold on. Fucking these people. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs, Big Dream. God damn it. So many of them. Well, that's gonna play for a while. Anyway, thank you. But anyway. Basically, there will always be some people that are just confused about what's happening. And you just got to be vigilant to make sure that you are doing as much as you can to make it clear. Now, if it's another role player that doesn't get it,
then how do you combat that with the other role player?
Well, once again, the voice thing, the enunciation thing, all of that stuff. But if somebody believes that you are doing things in character based off of out-of-character drama, right, which is probably the most common thing you're talking about, everyone needs to understand that it is nearly impossible, hell, I'd say impossible even, to completely remove your own feelings from the character's feelings. If somebody says something really mean to you, and it hurt your feelings, and you interact with their character as your character, it's very difficult to separate that. Just like for some reason, all you fucking people like me. So when my character walks up to you and starts calling you fucking dumbbell whatever, bushwhacker, you're like, oh, he's so sweet. You know what I mean? There will always be that level. And it's important to separate those things. And not everybody's going to do it. The best advice I have for that, you can't make someone else do something, think something, feel something. You can't do that. I mean, well, you can, but then you're like a high-level manipulator and you don't want to be that person, trust me. So you don't want to make people feel that way. You can't. Not if you want to maintain a healthy relationship with them. So therefore, you do what you can. And if everybody does everything that they can, there will be low levels of confusion, and that confusion will never erupt into huge drama. I say never, but that's not true. It will be reduced. But drama is not something that you can completely avoid, unfortunately, because the people behind this are human, and humans are not perfect, except for Ribbon.
I agree.
Got him.
Adorable.
Yeah.
Alright, anyway.
What?
My legs. Oh, I'm an old man. I swear to God. I was so exhausted after the fight. I just laid on my bed, just. Anyway.
Wow, what the
chat,
fuck?
what do you want? How many people are watching right now? Oh my God. Why? Why? Why?
Arcadum's talking.
All I'm doing is just talking about nothing important. Oh, Jesus. People will watch anything. Make a D&D podcast? Oh my God. I could talk about D&D forever. Holy shit. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Thank you for the 10 gifted subs, my.
Turn around, May.
Oh look, something I agree with.
Jesus Christ. So many AC 130s in chat just wasting people. Everyone's homeless, man. Everyone's homeless.
Yay,
Ridiculous.
death.
Anyway.
I mean, wait, what?
Starting to come down to the ending of this, I guess. I think I went over all the pieces I wanted to go over. Yeah.
So now what the fuck do we do?
Well. I'm sorry, I can't hear anything. I'm beckoning to the sky.
I mean, same. I can't hear shit most of the time I'm talking.
It's before
a newcomer!
God. I have to add new sub sounds. There's only like 5 of them. I gotta add more of them. God, I gotta add more of them, man. But... Fuck! Anyway. Okay, thanks, Jay. Another 10? Sure. Why not?
Oh my God.
Hold on. What are we at? Hey, we're up to 42 so far.
Like a normal person.
Let's just go for 800, chat room. Why not?
Why'd you say that?
50 away.
Now they're gonna do it.
Because I'm a bullfighter and chat is an angry cow.
I can respect that.
And then look at
Do it, you won't.
You are now
800, you sure?
Hey,
You don't have that much money, I know.
I'm delicious.
Nice try. No.
And before one of the four horsemen show up.
Your point?
Bruh.
At least again.
Get Valko to do sexy boys. You know what? I should get him to do that. That should definitely be oh my God. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs, I know. He said, challenging. I should get fucking, I should totally get Valko to do that. Just go, sexy boys, as one of my sons.
I'm dying over here. Come on, man. Let me breathe.
Or I'll just get, oh my God, I'll just get all of you doing that. Just going,
Do I get paid?
Just don't do that.
No, you get to live.
Just don't do that over
Fuck you,
Discord.
Sharky.
Because we all know what happens when you do that over Discord.
You know what you said. I will turn you into cook. Whatever you are.
oh my God.
You forget what I am.
Sexy boys over here.
Asking you.
Hey, Cabin.
Hey.
I ain't sexy though. I'm a burnt chicken nugget.
Oh my God. Anyway, I guess that's all I had to say.
Oh, Jesus.
So do we kill each other now, or?
It was great. Thanks, Arcadum. Are you gonna put it up on YouTube?
Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to edit it. I'll have to edit it
Arcadium
first.
has YouTube, Nani? You have YouTube?
Man, okay, I want to talk about this real quick. Alright, so, I want you guys to come on a journey with me. Last year, in the middle of the year, right, I was just sitting there, I hit my sub goal of 700 subs, like at a full-time stream, I was sitting at about 800, and then, I don't know how it happened, but people just started gifting subs like fucking crazy. And then in the course of, I think it was, a week and a half when the AC 130 meme really took off, I was at 1,752 sub points. That's the type of numbers of, people who actually have talent, So I was losing my mind when I got up there. Oh my god, somebody donated to me and it just scared the shit out of me.
Oh my god, what is it?
It's God, I can't even look at it. I don't have Steam Labs open. Hold on. What? No, that's not what I need. What? Can somebody tell me how much? Who did that?
It was $20.
Who did it?
Whoever that
It was
From Shan.
It was from Shan. Shan Rock.
No, thank you, Shan.
Right there.
My
fucking shushing on that shit.
They're right there.
My donation sound is by the other Hearthstone card, and now it's time for the ultimate test. That's what it is. Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Thank you for
At least it's not someone going, "Ah, shit!"
But anyway, yeah, I hit
I don't want to talk about it.
1,700, and I lost my mind.
Were you streaming anything specific for it, or did it just
sitting in my world, looking at a mirror? I was just sitting there, and it just happened. It made no sense at all. I've got people in here that have 800 or something like that gifted subs to me. Ino has 800. Big Dream has 400. I don't get it, dude. I don't understand what's happening. But, that happened. And the thing is, the most people I've ever had watching me without a host is 360. Most ever. So I'm sitting there 1,700 sub points, and I'm like, what is this? What is happening? Why? Why is this happening? And then I fell, and then at the beginning of this year, I fell down below my full-time streaming thing, and I was really worried about it. Now I'm just now I just don't worry anymore. I just whatever. It'll work out. I'm not worried about it. I'm just
things will
chilling, and
things will just happen?
Fuck it, let it happen.
apparently there's Stream will take care of me. They'll just Howard came earn $2,000 from looking at a mirror.
Mirror streamers are taking over, confirmed.
Dermatologists hate him.
Crazy. You just have him just sitting there looking at a mirror, man.
Don't need it up.
Their sharps are longer than mine.
God. They really won't let him stop stream. How many do you have now, Big Dream? Hold on, can I see? How much? I can't tell from here. This shit is so difficult.
Huh?
I gotta get some new emotes too. I gotta come up with some new ones.
Wait. The last time I think I saw one of your streams was last year. Are you telling me you didn't change them since last year?
Yeah, his sub noises have been the same.
Oh my god. I can relate to that. I can relate to that, just not willingness to change anything.
It was, we were getting, also it was, Tiffany, right? We were getting her VR set.
Oh, thanks, Big Dream, for the gifted fucking whatever. Who cares?
Oh, hey,
Holy
now you
shit.
can see how many he has. 91.
91, man.
and then my kitty here.
What time is it?
It is
Midnight.
Time zone.
CST. 12 EST.
It's almost 11 Central.
11:44
your
p.m. EST.
It's almost 11.
Midnight EST.
Oh, thanks, Big Dream, for another 10. Sure, why not?
Now he's 101.
Yeah, this.
He was number 1. I said it. You heard me.
I'm just gonna lay here and slowly drown in money.
Jesus Christ, I can feel the disappointment.
You know this room does have a mirror. We can
Like
always
Scrooge
go to the
McDuck?
What am I supposed
Yeah, go find a mirror.
Like,
We'll
you
go,
know
we'll
what?
go to the
You're right.
mirror.
Take me to a mirror.
That's
This way.
Away!
It's right over here.
Let's go. Forward, my minions. Yes, excellent. Decadent. Oh yes, take me to the mirror.
Walk like a normal person.
Christy!
Or fly. Whatever works.
Like you.
Christy!
I could fly if I wanted to.
I could fly if I wanted to. But not getting into that.
My cat is literally just walking behind me, so I just have like a cat backrest.
I'm considering frames. I don't know if I'll do that.
I actually can't get it to go in. It's not working for me.
All you do is just crouch, or just, it's kind of like,
Oh, there it is.
see, like right here. Ish.
Towards the mirror, I shall now drink of it.
And it's right
Narcissism
here.
activated.
And then money.
There you go.
Yes, hello, hello, everyone. Hold on, let me stand up.
Oh
Okay.
no. Jackie's laying on my arms. Save me.
All
You're
right,
dead.
so
They're
here's
stuck in
So at
this
least it's
thing.
taking screenshots, miss
so
you.
this is
Move
what
your arm.
happened.
Well, I'm gonna
the
end
last
screen.
time, the last time I stood 788 sub points. Let's see what
in
you
10
got,
minutes.
chat room.
Oh my. Double mirror.
Nitsuit's
Why
face
am I getting pinged?
backwards.
It's invisible on the other side.
It's a one-way mirror. One way.
Arcanum is best girl.
Best girl.
Hamlet over here looking good.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh, hold on.
Looks good.
I think Spaz worked
This
on
thanks
my
to
voting character a little bit.
Deal.
Let's see.
Also, if any of you try to eat me, I swear to God, I will read and run away.
Oh, I want to see this. I've been dying.
I'm really dying over this. I'm really happy that it works.
Hmm? Oh.
Yeah.
No, Hamlet.
Oh,
that-
it's the new,
I hit a
Hamlet,
spike.
stay back.
Okay, hold on.
character is Miss You. I'm sorry.
This is
All right,
Vincent.
all right.
No, that's Vincent. Okay, the new Vincent, huh?
You got an up.
Hey, Ruben, what's up?
Magic, right?
Oh, stop! Why does everyone want to eat me?
Oh no.
Ruben!
I am the devourer of sins!
Okay.
Boy.
I looked at this. I looked at this, and like Spaz added some stuff, and I have no idea how it works. Look at this. So it's like,
Oh my.
I've got. How do I bring up a camera?
Oh my
How do I
god, you
do-
got like stink smells like falling off of you.
You do have stink smells. Look at his feet. Look at the feet part.
He's Pigpen.
Help the
Well, I'm a homeless man. What do you expect? Okay. That isn't working. I can't get that to work. I don't fucking know how to work. All right. So it's like,
You have feet that stink.
listen to that. You hear that?
You do have stinky feet.
Like, listen.
Wait, am I being addressed or? Oblivious, accept it.
Nice.
Oh, that's.
Mitsu.
Hold on.
You are truly homeless now. Oh, you puffed away.
Oh.
Oh
It's still stinky though.
It's pretty good. So I gotta remember how to pull the sword out. Oh, there we go.
So damn short. I know, I couldn't touch it for like the longest.
He's a vegan. He's powered by the power of delicious
For a
tofu
moment, I thought you said
and soy.
the people that don't eat meat.
Yeah, no, they said vegan.
That's so fucking cool, dude. Look at that.
By the power of
Okay,
grace.
then I approve of this character. I'm not gonna
Oh,
eat.
dude.
Wow, go
I'm all about like this like black trail things. Like eels.
Oh yeah, these things, yeah.
I can't take you seriously. You're too adorable.
Oh, does it leave a
That's why
trail?
you should be the most scared.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so good, dude.
That is the plan. If you do not fear me, then I can eat you for efficient.
Ribbon, I'm sorry. I have something to tell you.
Oh shit! What the fuck? Hold
You
on.
have an actual sword draw animation there.
Oh.
Wow, go that far.
Holy fuck!
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Now that's awesome.
Also, Oblivious, do me a favor and don't move.
Charles is saying jump while doing that.
Oblivious, no.
Goodness.
Why'd you say something wrathful? Jesus.
Mitsu, get up.
It's a ball you cast.
Oh.
When you jump, it goes.
Mitsu, get her. Mitsu, goddammit, I need to take a picture.
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome. Holy shit.
You just have to wait for the perfect moment.
Mitsu, help me out. I'll give you clips.
Do it with the foot. Oh wow.
Mitsu, you disappoint me greatly.
It would be a foot thing.
I can't hear you if you're speaking. Like, hello. No,
The foot fetish is strong.
okay.
Also, we need to talk about that clip from Shamanju's thing. Did you take that?
Jump.
Oh. Okay.
Just yeeted.
Wow. What?
Mm-hmm.
Come here.
Holy shit.
Come here. Come here.
To be honest, I need to get something like that on my models.
Don't make me quack you both.
Oh boy, my aunt is gonna be
We don't have to.
mildly upset, but
I can only go up.
I don't know.
Oh.
the thing is that I need to
Earlier, at around 7 or 8 o'clock, people told me to eat
Hello.
because I hadn't eaten all day yet.
Hello.
So technically,
Hello.
I did not eat all, wait, what was what is today? Today's Wednesday and it's turning into Thursday.